Shalom, shalom, mishpacha wa haberim. That means peace, wellness, and blessings to the family and friends out there. What's up? It's your girl, sister Ashanti 916 Shan. Also Shanti Doc on the Facebook. I want to say Shabbat Shalom to everybody listening now, and to everyone who will listen later. Shabbat Shalom. Hope you have a good and blessed Sabbath rest, Erev Shabbat right now. It's a blessing and an honor and a privilege to be able to partake in the Most High's rest, practicing for the kingdom, living in the kingdom. So, shalom, Sister Alicia. How you doing? Thank you for joining in. This is part 7 to the series we've done. This is part 7 and the final video in the 7-part series, the household of God, or the household of Yahweh, looking at first century AD household codes, looking at Pauline epistles and letters, getting a better understanding, so we can better walk in the faith we have in the Most High Yahweh through His Son Yeshua, right? And I've done this video for several reasons, but before I do that, let me give you the title. So the title is, forgot to say what tonight's title is, right? It's a continuation from last week's, and pretty much it's the household codes of Yahweh in Paul's letters. We're going to be continuing to look at the head synopsis, what head generally means when you look at the renewal covenant text, right? And I've asserted that head in the text, kaphale, when it's used mainly in the Pauline epistles, it does not mean leader, ruler, or authority, right? So with that being said, before I get into the gist of, again, why I did this video series, why BA did this video series, I'm going to have BA formally introduce himself. All right. So BA, let me get you off mute. Come on in.
Greetings, everybody. All praises due to the Most High God in the name of His only anointed, known as Yeshua the Christ. Um, Tonight is the last night that we're going to be going over the household codes. Like I said, as always, I'm just here to help and chime in. This is Ashanti's. She spearheaded this, and it has been just a blessing for me to be a part of it, because some of the information I'm privy to, and she's carried more weight than I have when it comes to this. I have caught up on a few commentaries myself. I've been reading as well, and I'm gonna most definitely push myself to know more. This is also. So this evening I'll do the usual. I'll just chime in and share my little 2 cents. I'll just go from there. Most definitely.
BA gonna share the two mites. You know what I mean? Thank you, BA. All praise, honor, and glory to the Most High Yahweh. Ko Tehelim, Ko Kabo, Wahati Fedethle Yahweh, Abinu Eloheinu. And that is all praise and honor and glory to Yahweh, our Elohim, our deity, our power, our Father. Right? Again, did this video for a few reasons. We've given disclaimers all of the time, but I do want to say this. I know I'm going to get accused of being a feminist, according to the 21st century AD urban Hebrew on the internet definition, right? I know I'm going to get accused of that. This series has not been and is not about woman over man. It's not about man over woman. It's about restoring proper balance of the Most High Yahweh and His people as it was laid out in the foundation in Genesis and Genesis, correct? Right? This is about learning about how we can get along in this walk. I know lately there's been re-emerging talks of holding leaders accountable in this community for abuse of women and abuse of children. The thing is, we want to help you get educated so that you have less chance of being manipulated. That's what this is about. You know the word for yourself. You know how to go into the tools for yourself and how to utilize those tools for yourself. you'll have the knowledge, the understanding, and the wisdom to be able to apply this so that people can't hit you with the okey doke, right? This is about the household of Yahweh, how Yahweh is the father, we are the children, we are siblings. We're supposed to have love, compassion, grace, mercy, and patience with and for one another. We're supposed to consider other people before we consider ourselves, right? That's what this is about. I know what was a while ago, probably in the beginning of July, there was an Israelite sister, 19-year-old. She was murdered, allegedly by like some 47-year-old man. And um, her name is Luana Sneed. And that prompted me definitely to go ahead and do this series because a lot of Paul's letters, some people hold a doctrine that they're teaching some sort of misogynistic lordship, rulership, and domination over women. They think women are supposed to be uh, subjective, blindly, and obedient at any drop of a dime and supposed to give sex, silence, and submission. A lot of people try to use Paul's letters and say, hey, nations, Gentiles, you guys can't get into the kingdom. A lot of people try to say that as well. And there's a lot of, me and BA call it the Hebrew man locker room type of mentality, to where a lot of our males and our brothers, they try to war with one another all day, sparring and seeing who can finesse the scriptures in the text more, and they just want to bicker, argue back and forth and try to dominate other males. That's not what this faith walk is about. We're supposed to be honoring the Most High Yahweh's name, glorifying the Most High Yahweh's name. We're supposed to be exhibiting the characteristics of the Spirit, right? Shabbat Shalom, Sister Marie. Thank you for joining in. Shabbat Shalom. So, um, we hope you continue to take what we've presented here to the Most High Yahweh and ask for the Holy Spirit to lead, guide you into all truth, into a sound conclusion. May you be provoked to go back and study. Seek these references that we bring up. And I'm actually going to, in tonight's description, after I'm done with this, give my sources. I've been giving my sources through this. However, I have not shared the Cruise Chronicle link that I've pretty much been glossing and gleaning this information from and presenting it to you. So I will put that in the description box when I'm done with this video. And I've also put in other research material that we've gone into and pulled or extrapolated information from as well. So we always give you a chance to go back and study these sources and materials that we researched on your own, right? Because we want you to do your due diligence to study, to show yourself approved unto the Most High Yahweh, not to man, but to the Most High Yahweh, so that you can develop and have this loving, close, tight, clingy relationship, personal relationship with the Most High Yahweh, right? That the Most High Yahweh loves you, compassionate, He's comforting and consoling, right? And we want to show that. We've showed in videos 1 and 2 what the word paterfamilias means. I know you hear a lot of times about head of household. Well, we actually solidify that head of household meant that the paterfamilias was the estate owner, right? The owner who's legally and liable, responsible for the materials or assets that each person in the house owns, right? The paterfamilias themselves do not own they do not own the people. They own the materials, the property or assets of the people. And so we said Yahweh is the paterfamilias. Yahweh is the kingdom or estate owner. And Yahweh, right? Since Yahweh is the estate owner, then that means he has the legal accountability, or I should say legal responsibility and liability for the materials, right? The produce, the assets, the properties we have. That's why the task was taken on by Yeshua to pay the price or the penalty, right? for committing sin, because Yahweh is the paterfamilias, the estate owner, right? Shalom, mind of Joshua. Thanks for tuning in. Thanks for tuning in. So, with that being said, we're going to do a lot of reading. Bear with us. We're going to continue with this, right? We're going to continue with this, showing that head did not mean leader, ruler, or authority, right? I know we were talking about, especially in part 2 and part 3, how Augustus Caesar at that time, Yeshua was here, starting well before Yeshua was here physically, starting in about 27 BCE, all the way up to 14 AD is when he lived. But during that time, Augustus Caesar, or Julius Caesar's adopted son, Gaius Octavianus, he wanted to introduce or wanted to infuse lordship, rulership, domination, status seeking in patriarchy, when patriarchy alone originally just meant the determination of your nationality or your lineage would be determined by mainly the father, the seed, correct? That's normally what patriarchy was. However, when Rome came along, and Rome was the rule over Judea and a lot of the cities that Paul went to. Well, Gaius Octavianus infused lordship, rulership, domination, control, status, a social hierarchy, if you will, in the area, in the lands, right? So we were talking about Galatia, Ephesus, Corinth, Philippi, um, Colossae. Those are the main places where Paul roamed that were under Roman colonial rule. They had to obey and live by the laws of the land. A lot of this area had Roman or what you call imperial cult worship going on. You know, we've sprinkled a lot of information about that here and there. So we're going to continue with learning that there was a household code of the Roman Empire imposed on the people who were living in the lands. However, the Most High Yahweh um, has instructions, if you will, teachings, and Paul was reiterating that the household codes of Yahweh are a complete 180 from the social hierarchical status seeking structure of the Roman Empire or the lands that were under Roman colonial rule, right? The Most High Yahweh is a father who didn't want to force things on people, who didn't want to impose his will just vengefully upon people. He gave you a choice, right? If you wanted to serve him or serve someone else, right? There was a choice. So the Most High Yahweh, as the paterfamilias, as an estate owner, is compassionate and loving, and has these attributes of a nurturing mother, right? So with that being said, we're gonna read a lot. I know I was talking a lot, but you got to give these disclaimers, the introduction, all that good stuff, right? All right. So we're gonna continue with looking at Colossians. So we're going to look at what head means in Colossians, right? So before I have BA read, remember we were establishing last week that head. So far, we were looking um, at a couple of passages in 1 Corinthians 11, right? And we're going to continue to do that. But head pretty much either means some sort of physical head. It could be something of preeminence, like somebody's the head of their class, somebody, because of their achievements and their qualities, they're being recognized that way. Or a prominence. Prominence means something that sticks out because of something's location. It's the most visible thing. Or head could also mean the origin or source or beginning of something, right? So in Colossians, when Paul was speaking to the Colossians, well, there was a time when there was a lot of false teaching going on, right? The false teaching, like it was in Ephesus, it's Gnosticism, right? And some of the things that are refuted, in the book of Colossians are ceremonialism, asceticism, angel worship, secret knowledge, and a lot of relying on human knowledge and wisdom as their tradition, right? So the letter of Colossians, it begins with talking about Christ and his preeminence in all things. Remember, preeminence would signify, like I was saying, something of somebody being recognized as having these qualities or standing out because of their achievements, right? So, and it's in the middle of this area in Colossae that we see an instance of the head metaphor, right? So, reiterated last week, and I'll reiterate again the three ways the head metaphor can be looked at, right? When it came to this understanding, so function, representation, or elevation. And I know I'm going fast, but function. So, according to Greek thought, right, the anatomy the function of the head is to provide life. It's the life-giving source to the rest of the body, right? And then representation, the head for representation, because it's the part that is visible and sticks out. You know what I mean? Because of its location, it represents the whole body, like when you take a head count, right? And then elevation. The head is at the top, the highest point of the body, right? So that signifies prominence, right? If something sticks out because it's at the highest point of the body, well, it's recognized in its prominence, right? So we're going to look at Colossians here, and I'm going to have BA read, and then sometimes I'm going to have BA pause. He know how I do, right? So we're going to have BA read Colossians chapter 1, verses 15 to 20. You there, brother BA, or are you on mute?
Can you hear me?
Yep, can hear you now, definitely.
Yeah,
You all right
okay.
over there?
You're most deaf. Yeah, you said Colossians chapter 1.
Uh-huh. Colossians chapter 1, verses 15 to 20. And I'm gonna have you
All
read, and I'm
right.
gonna pause you at times. You know how we do.
Most deaf. So good.
Yeah.
Colossians chapter 1, and we're going to pick up at verse 15.
Hmm.
He is the image of the invisible God, the firstborn of all creation. For in him all things in heaven and on earth were cleansed, things visible and invisible, whether thrones or dominions or rulers or powers. All things have been created through him and for him. He himself is before all things. In him all things hold together. He is the head of the body. The church is the beginning, the firstborn from the dead, so that
Pause.
he might.
Pause. You said the church is
Yep.
the beginning. What
Mhm.
what what version you reading?
I'm reading from the it is the Greek interlinear
All right,
New
because
Testament.
you said Christ is the beginning, and then you said the church is the beginning.
Yeah, that's what it says. It says,
Okay, we're gonna correct that. Keep reading.
what's that?
We're gonna correct that. Then we're gonna look at these translate. We're gonna look at the
All right.
original. Go ahead.
He is the head of the body. The church, he is the beginning, the firstborn from the dead, so that he might come to have first place in everything.
All
For
right,
in
pause.
him,
Pause. Pause. Let me read verse 18 from the scriptures ISR. It says, and he is the head of the body, the assembly. He's the head of the body, the assembly, right?
yep,
So pretty much he's the head of the assembly. The head is he who is the beginning, the firstborn from the dead, that he might become the one who is first in all. See, I like to do these things because sometimes when you're reading how something is written in the Greek or the Hebrew, how you read the narratives, how they write sometimes is not how we see a writing over here in the English Western mind. You know what I mean? It'll have you thinking that the assembly is the beginning. No, he's the head of the assembly. He's the head who was the beginning, right? Okay, go
no,
ahead.
let me read it one more time. In verse 18, maybe
Go ahead.
maybe I must have read it wrong. He is the head of the body, the church. He is the beginning.
There you go.
So, yes, that's my mistake. The firstborn from the dead, so that he might come to have first place in everything. For in him all the fullness of God or Elohim was pleased to dwell. And through him God was pleased to reconcile to himself all things, whether on earth or in heaven, by making peace through the blood of his cross.
All right, pause. So Christ is the head, meaning the origin of creation, because he was there in the beginning, right? We see John chapter 1. So he is the head in that he's more elevated in status, but not head because he exercises authority or rules over, right? So Christ is the head in that he existed before anything else. So he's that point of origin. Head is that point of origin, the beginning, that source, right? The life-giving source that nurtures and sustains life for all of us, right? Just like the Greek in the Greek thought, right? The head does for a body. So since he's the beginning and the origin of the assembly, right? Right, he has the exalted status, right? The preeminence, and that's relative to everyone and anything else of the firstborn. So that makes that makes the Messiah Yeshua worthy of honor, right? Because of what? The qualities or the accomplishments or achievements, right? And he's the firstborn of creation and firstborn of the renewed creation. So that means he is before the origin and also above, prominent in all things. That makes sense, BA. All right. So we're going to continue. Colossians chapter 2, verses 6 to 19.
Colossians chapter 2, we're going to pick it up at verse 6. As you therefore have received Christ the Lord, continue to live your lives in him, rooted and built up in him, and established in the faith, just as you were taught, abounding in thanksgiving. See to it that no one takes you captive through philosophy and empty deceit, according to human tradition, according to the elemental spirits of the universe, and not according universe, and not according to Christ, for in him the fullness of deity dwells bodily, and you have come to fullness in him who is the head of every ruler and authority.
Pause. Pause. So in verses 6 and 7, you've accepted Messiah, Yeshua the Master, walk in him, and you've been rooted in him. When you're at the root, that's the source of where you're going to get your nourishment from, right? And then you're going to grow and build up in him from there, right? And it says
The
verse 8,
foundation.
yeah, the foundation, right? And so here you have what I was just pretty much giving you a picture of or image of is the soil with the plant, right? You have your plant that sinks down into the roots for that nourishment, for that life-giving source. And so the Colossians at this time, they're being prey or victim to listening to false teaching and beginning to have their roots in pretty much incorrect soil. So they need to put their roots or connect with Yeshua as their life-giving source, right? And then verse 8, you have verse 8, um, see to it that no one makes a prey of you through philosophy and empty or vain deceit, according to the tradition of men, according to the elementary matters of the world. Elementary matters, right? Elementary matters, Gnosticism, elements of the universe, right? It's a belief in some of the areas with their Greco-Roman pagan beliefs that celestial bodies rule life, right? They have this thing about the archons and the thing about that, right? So let's see. Continue reading, BA, and then I'm gonna pause you again.
All right, for sure. Verse 11.
Mm-hmm.
In him also you were circumcised with the spiritual with with a spiritual circumcision, by putting off the body of the flesh and the circumcision of Christ, when you were buried with him in baptism, you were also raised with him through faith in the power of Elohim, who
Mm-hmm.
raised him from the dead. And when you were dead in trespasses and the uncircumcision of your flesh, God made you alive together with him when he forgave us all our trespasses, erasing the record that stood against us with its legal demands. He set this aside, nailing it to the cross. He disarmed the rulers and authorities and made a public example of them, triumphing over them in it. Therefore, do not let anyone condemn you in matters of food and drink, or observing festivals, new moons, or Sabbaths. These are only a shadow of what is to come, but the substance belongs to Christ. Do
All
not
right.
let.
Pause.
Yep.
Yep. I'm just having you read to verse 17. So,
Mhm.
uh, the metaphor head is used here. Yes, we'll explain that. So, head, like I said, means in this case the origin, the beginning of where they came through, right? So he's the head, the originating, life-giving source, the beginning, right? So, verse 18. Well, actually, let me see something here. Okay, that was for verse 15. It says, when you strip the principalities and authorities, um he made a public display of them, having prevailed over them in it, right? So I just wanted to reiterate what verse I was given the note for. And Mind of Joshua, I definitely saw your statement. That's really awesome. Yeah, it's true history, right? Paul roamed these areas, and some of the evidence that these cities existed are still there. You know, you have archaeologists over there all the time. It's a lot of tourist attraction, all right. And then Sister Yahara, how you doing, sis? I know you want to be with us, and I know about that time change, but all praise to the Most High Yahweh that you made it safe. Safe travels. Love you, sis. Thank you for joining in just for a little bit of time here. I know you're going to go back, right? So let's see. Actually, I'm going to have you read verse 18, BA. I'm going to have you read verse 18.
Verse 18. Do not let anyone disqualify you, insisting on self abasement and worship of angels, dwellings, or visions, puffed up without a cause by a human way of thinking.
Mm. So, again, this shows that Paul is teaching against being um being so fanaticized with false teaching, and then they must reject it to come full circle to what began at the beginning of this passage. Be rooted in Yeshua Messiah, to where your life-giving nourishment comes from, right? So the roots of the human body are what? From the head, because that's where the sustenance comes from, right? um so here again, we don't see any rulership, we don't see no authority, right? We see life-giving source, we see preeminence. Now, BA, you want to reiterate about anything you just saw in this passage before I move on? Because I know me and you, we talk about this quite often. Go ahead.
Um, One thing that is that stands out to me all the time when we read this, and I'll go back to verse 14,
Mm,
and it reads, no, it's on 13. And when you were dead in your trespasses and the uncircumcision of your flesh, God made you alive together with him when he forgave us all our trespasses. 14 is the key. Erasing the record that stood against us with its legal demands.
mm,
Read that in yours real quick, sis.
sure.
14.
I'll read 13 and 14. It says, and you
Yep.
being dead in your trespasses and the uncircumcision of your flesh, he has made alive together with him, having forgiven you all trespasses, having blotted out that which was written by hand against us by the dogmas which stood against us, and he has taken it out of the way, having nailed it to the stake.
Now, wow. Uh, I know the King James it says it's worded. We all have read this in the King James, but my point overall in this translation it says again. I'll read it. Erasing the record that stood against us with its legal demands.
Mm, the oral law.
Um, the
The
yeah,
big.
that's nothing legal in the Torah.
Come
You're
on.
either right or you're wrong
Nothing legal in the Torah about what?
about. And then what I would say, erasing the record that stood against us with legal demands, he set this aside. He set it aside. He set that those traditions of man aside, those that legalistic way of thinking. That's not talking about Torah that was given to Moses. We're stressing to people. When you are reading the letters of Paul, we're stressing that you read or get familiar with what was going on in the first century AD, the first, second, the third, and fourth century AD. Understand what was going on historically, what Paul was talking about. You had your different sets. You had your Pharisees, you had the Essenes, the Sadducees, the imperial cult worshippers. Then you had different other factions like Sakari and various others who had their different ways of thinking. And one thing they had in common, the oral traditions, which is normally called the oral laws or the halakha, if I'm not yeah, halakha.
Yep.
This
Hmm.
was a lifestyle. This is beyond religion. This became a standard way of living. It got to a point overall historically at this time that the Jews, those who lived in the land region, they were called Judeans. They adopted these different principles that were contrary to what the Most High gave to Moses because they were afraid that the Gentiles would take what the Most High gave them, which is holy, and corrupt it. So they create this system called defense, which you also understand to be the oral traditions, which you can find in the Talmud. This
Right.
is
One of
what Paul is talking about here.
the, mhm.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
Now, I was going to say and reiterate one of the oral traditions or the traditions of men was saying that the Gentiles or the nations cannot get into the kingdom
Exactly.
unless they do it the man-made elite way of coming up with things. They said, "Hey, get circumcised, get this circumcision ethnic identity marker to be in the kingdom to be saved." But we know that you don't get circumcised to be saved. You don't get circumcised to be in the kingdom because
Exactly.
Abraham was not circumcised for about 20 years before, right? And he was being obedient to the Most High Yahweh, leaving his father's house, leaving his country, and the ways, right? And the Most High counted that for righteousness, right? The Most High counted that obedience for righteousness. So when the Most High saw Abraham doing that, Abraham was uncircumcised in being obedient, and the Most High counting that to him for righteousness. Paul is not saying don't get circumcised. Paul is just saying, hey, listen here. If you're going to get circumcised for the original reason that the Most High Yahweh gave it, and the original reason that the Mosaic Law through Yahweh presented it. Right?
Don't do it to boast.
Don't do it to boast either. Right?
Yeah, because
Yeah.
that's what we see with the Sanhedrin, which consists of the Pharisees and the Sadducees, the scribes. We saw them wanting to be seen of men. So now all of a sudden, the standard socially going on in Jerusalem or Palestine at this time were the traditions of the elders
Hmm.
and of the sages and the rabbis.
Right.
And you got to remember, they came out of captivity. And
Hmm.
at this point, they're Hellenized by the Greeks. And now
Hmm.
they're under Roman rule. They're under the Roman powers. They're being colonialized. So
Mm.
now all of a sudden, in order to try to protect what the Most High gave to Moses, which is separate or sacred rather, they decided, you know what, let's make up our own little rules to keep the Gentiles away. See? And what did Moses say? Do not add and do not take away. Deuteronomy chapter 4.
Hmm.
I just want to state that, and we can move on, sis, if you would like.
Yeah, it also says in Leviticus 19 and Numbers 15, there should be one law, one mishpat for the stranger, the alien, the ger. They can come into the kingdom. There should be one law for you as it is. It's one law for them as it is for you, and they shall be treated like the native or as the
The
native.
same. Exactly. It's one.
Right. So the Mosaic law um, gave the nations, humanity, a chance to come back into the covenant fold of the Most High Yahweh. That's what Israel was chosen to be a beacon of light for,
Exactly.
right? So let's go to the famous Ephesians,
Uh-oh.
right? We're gonna look at how a lot of a lot of misinterpretation about what man is supposed to or husband is supposed to do over his wife and all this stuff, right? We're gonna look
Uh-oh.
at this and we're gonna put things back into their proper perspective, right? We're gonna
They're gonna
put
call the
things.
troops on this.
Yeah, they gonna call us. Call them. Call
Me too.
them.
I'll be able to
Right?
shout to the angel again.
Yeah. You know us.
Oh man.
We're gonna look at Ephesians chapter 5, right? And so in Ephesians, we don't see necessarily
Oh.
a false teaching or a hearsay, but we do see some stuff going on, right? And Ephesus, this was a place where there was all sorts of licentiousness going on, right? There was mother goddess worship. Uh, there's a lot of what you call it, women who had high status in that land. They took to a lot of religious factions that gave them prestige and high positions. You know what I mean? Women of influence.
Just like
Yeah,
today.
yeah, man. And so you got this going on in Ephesus, but let me do this real quick. Yeah, let me get to it. Ephesus. Let me read, and I'm reading from the scriptures ISR, unless I need to pull out this Greek, but I'm going to read from Ephesians chapter 1, verse 22. And it says, "And he put all under his feet and gave him to be the head over all to the assembly." I'm going to mute you real quick, BA, while you shuffling. Is that cool? Or, the flipper, BA the flipper. You know what I mean? Hey, look, let me give you a little joke real quick. Hey, BA, when he go, right, say I'm at Ephesians right now, right? I'm at Ephesians, right? But say, hey, BA, I need you to go to Isaiah. No, 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 no. Say I need you to go to Exodus, right? You see I'm in Ephesians. And I say, BA, go to Exodus. BA do this. He'll do this. You know what I'm saying? instead of flipping it over and coming. Hey, but we close like that. We can get on each other like that. But Ephesians chapter 1, I just read verse 22. And he put all under his feet. And I'll tell you where that comes from in a minute if you haven't gathered that yet. And gave him to be the head over all to the assembly. Verse 23, which is his body. He's head over the what? The body. He's head of the body. The completeness of him who fills all in all. Right? So this parallels with what we saw in Colossians. Right? He's the head of the body, and that there was this, of course, the widespread belief of the elemental spirits of the universe being the ruler, but they said that these bodies controlled all these events, right? And we see head here is physical. Physical. If you have a body, you have a head. Doesn't emphasize anything about leader, ruler, or authority, right? Even though Colossians Sometimes Ephesians, they did want to say, hey, these celestials, elemental spirits, they rule. All right, I'm gonna have BA read verses. I'm gonna have them go back and read from verse 15 and read all the way down what I read. Bring out a little emphasis sometimes when I read some verses first.
Chapter 1.
Mm-hmm. So
All right.
Ephesians chapter 1, verses 15 to 23.
All right. I have heard of your faith in the Lord Jesus and your love towards all the saints, and for this reason I do not cease to give thanks for you as I remember you in my prayers. I pray that the God of our Lord Jesus Christ, the Father of glory, may give you a spirit of wisdom and revelation
Mm-hmm.
as you come to know him, so that with the eyes of your heart enlightened, you may know what is the hope to which he has called you. What are the riches of his glorious inheritance among the saints? And what is the immeasurable greatness of his power for us who believe according to the working of his great power? God put this power to work in Christ when he raised him from the dead and seated him at the right hand in the heavenly places, far above all rule and authority and power and dominion, and above every name that is named, not only in this age but also in the age to come. And he has put all things under his feet and has made him the head over all things for the church, which is his body, the fullness of him who fills all in all.
Right. So it says the Most High Yahweh put him at the right hand. Verse 21, far above all these rulers, these celestial bodies that you guys think have some authority, right? Gave him the power and mastery and every name that is named, not only in this age, but also in the one to come, right? So Paul is reiterating here that he wants the believers, the newfound believers, the converts who are from the nations coming over, converting to the ways of the Most High Yahweh through the Son Yeshua, right? He wants them to understand and have an appreciation for the source of power and glory to which they are connected now through Yeshua Messiah, being they are a part of him, the body, right? This comes from Psalms 8. I said I was going to read where that came from, where verse 22 came from. Psalms 8, I'm going to read it. It says, "O Yahweh, our master, how excellent is your name in all the earth." We're going to emphasize verse 6. You who set your splendor above the heavens, out of the mouth of babes and infants, you have founded strength because of your adversaries to put an end to enemy and avenger. For I see your heavens, the work of your fingers, the moon and the stars which you have established. See, the moon, the stars, the work of the heavens, the Most High Yahweh established. So if the Most High Yahweh established and created these celestial bodies, how are these celestial bodies or elemental things the rulers of the earth? They're the creation, right? Verse 4. What is man that you remember him, and the son of man that you visit him? Yet you have made him a little less than Elohim, and have crowned him with glory and splendor. Verse 6. You made him rule over the works of your hands. You have put all under his feet, all sheep and oxen, and also the beasts of the field, the birds of the heavens, and the fish of the sea, passing through the paths of the seas. O Yahweh, our master, how excellent is your name in all of the earth. So verse 6, you made the one you made little less than the angels, right? Or a little, excuse me, the one you made a little less than Elohim. And this is where we see a little bit of the understanding where Some of the sages talk about the lesser Yahweh, right? You made him to rule over the works of your hands, right? You put all under his feet.
I got in the Septuagint as well.
Go ahead.
We'll start at verse 1.
Sure. And then I'm going to elaborate a little bit.
All right. I will give thanks, O thee. I will give thanks to thee, O Lord, with my whole heart. I will recount all thy wonderful works. I will be glad and exalt thee in thee. I will sing to thy name, O thou most high. When my enemies are turned back, they shall be feeble, and perish at thy presence. For thou hast maintained my cause and my right. Thou sattest on the throne that judges righteousness. Thou hast rebuked the nations, and the ungodly one has perished. Thou hast blotted out their name forever, even forever and ever. The sword of the enemy have failed utterly, and thou hast destroyed cities. Their memorial has been destroyed with a noise. Well, hold on, is that right? I'm sorry. My apologies. That's verse. That's chapter.
You was reading the wrong chapter, huh? I was like, man, what is BA talking about? Okay.
Yeah. Verse 8. Okay. Okay. I'll just read verse
Psalms
3.
Psalms 8. Psalms 8. Just read verse 6. Just read
Verse 6. Yeah.
verse
My
6.
apologies for that. And thou hast set him over the works of thy hands. Thou hast put all things under his feet.
All right. So pretty much in some translations like the NRSV, it says in verse 4. It says, "What are human beings that you remember him?" Or son of human beings that you visit him. It's different translations, right? Because they're
Mm-hmm.
looking at anthropos as human beings, right? Sometimes translated men. Um, so in verse 5 here, it would be rendered uh, elatosas auton braku ti para angulus doxekai time Estefanosas auton. So it says pretty much um, you've lessened him a little shorter than any of the angels. But auton is him, right? So it's pretty much signifying there's a him. But the sometimes anthropos as human being can be translated as man, right? So it just depends on what translation you read, but we always try to go back into the original language here. So it says you lessen him um, a little shorter than the angels, having honor and glory, you crowned him, right? Now, if it meant if it said them, or if it meant them or mankind, it would be like autus for the plural instead of auton. So I think this is singular. So there is a celebration here about uh, exercising of Yeshua's authority over uh, creation. So if we are brothers and sisters of Yeshua, right, this also goes back to the dominion given to human beings, right, in Genesis 1. We have dominion to rule over the birds of the air, the fish of the sea, the animals, the beasts of the field, and the creeping um, creatures on the land or the earth. There was no commandment given to have dominion of other human beings. There was no commandment for other beings to have dominion over one another, right? But now, since I went back to Genesis, right, what did we see happen to mankind or human being or humankind? They rebelled, and now they're dead in their sin. They've lost they've lost a little bit of the ability to have dominion properly over the things they were given dominion of as far as creation.
Exactly.
So Yeshua, which is the Son of Man, he's going to come to have what? Dominion over creation, and all things are going to be placed under his feet. And so
Hmm.
by coming into the body of Yeshua Messiah, he's the head of the body. We are regents. We're restored as regents of creation, right? And so we believe that also this is the point that Hebrews is making in chapter 2. So let's go there. So let's go to Hebrews chapter 2. And we read verses 6 to 18. What does Sister Marie say? That's all right, B-Day. There is some comfort in the sound of you turning pages. Don't pay any mind to sis.
Yeah, for that I'm turning my pages. See, what's that? Hebrews chapter 2,
Yep.
what
Hebrews chapter
verse?
2, verses 6 to 18.
6 to 18.
Hmm.
All right, and it reads. Hold on for a second. 5. Okay, but someone has testified somewhere.
Hmm.
What are human beings that you are mindful of them, or mortals that you care for them? You have made them for a little while lower than the angels. You have crowned them with the glory and honor, subjecting all things under their feet. Nothing is subject, nothing is subjecting all things to them. God left nothing outside their control. As it is, we do not yet see everything in subjection to them. But we do see Yeshua or Jesus, who for a little while has made lower than the angels, now crowned with the glory and honor because of the suffering of, of death, so that by the grace of God he might taste death for everyone. It was fitting that God, for whom for whom and though whom all things exist, and bringing many children to glory, should make the pioneer of their salvation perfect through sufferings. For the one who sanctifies and those who are sanctified all have one Father. For this reason, Jesus is not ashamed to call them brothers and sisters, saying, I will proclaim your name to my brother and sisters. In the midst of the congregation, I will praise you. Again, I will put my trust in him. Again, here I am and the children whom God has given me. Since therefore the children share flesh and blood, he himself likewise shared the same things, so that through death he might destroy the one who has the power of death, that is the devil, and free those who all their lives were held in slavery by the fear of death. For it is clear that he did not come to help angels, but the descendants of Abraham.
All right. What did you read to?
18.
That's Septuagint.
I'm sorry, 17. Sorry. Therefore, he had come to Therefore, he had to become like his brothers and sisters in every respect, so that he might be a merciful and faithful high priest in the service of God to make a sacrifice of atonement for the sins of the people. Because he himself was tested by what he suffered, he is able to help those who are being tested. Man, that's powerful right there.
You want to say something before I do?
Because if you go to the book of Mark specifically points out the suffering of Messiah, which we understand is line up with Isaiah 53, the suffering
Hmm.
servant.
Come on.
So, brothers and sisters, when you get a chance, link this up with the book of Mark and read the history of the book of Mark as well. And it specifically talks about, or it specifically will show you while you're reading the text, that he went through a lot of suffering and moaning and groaning, dealing with a hard head, stiff necked people. Just
Hmm.
that simple. And it
Right.
lines up with Isaiah 53 to a T. Man, it lines up with it perfectly.
So in this passage, right, we see that that Yeshua Messiah has made us brothers and sisters because we join in the family with him, right? We were made to share in that inheritance. We get that royal status, right? because we're a royal priesthood, like First Peter 2 was saying, and that it was a reiteration of Exodus 19. We rule and reign with him. So um, we saw in the Gospels that Yeshua uses what the fictive family metaphor to illustrate atonement and restoration of humanity over creation, right? So by being the head, the source, the life-giving source, and the origin of the assembly, the body, he becomes one with it and emanates from it life and that life force that sustains it. And whatever glory and honor belongs to head as the origin, beginning, or source, you know, are extensively experienced by the body. So humankind is restored as what? Co-regents over the creation as children of Yahweh. And as children of Yahweh, we are in the house of Yahweh. We're in the house of Yahweh. We are the children. We have Yahweh as Father. So again, I keep reiterating again, this don't got nothing to say about no ruling anybody. This don't got nothing to say about no status, as we see here a lot in the Roman colonial lands. There was an obsession with status, right? Let's go to Ephesians 4. Ephesians 4. And I'm going to have you read verses 11 to 16, BA.
Ephesians 4, we're going to pick up at verse 11. And it reads, the gifts he gave were that some would be apostles, and some prophets, some evangelists, some pastors and teachers, to equip the saints for the work of ministry or serving, for building up the body of Christ, until all of us come to be to the uniting of the faith and of the knowledge of the Son of God, to maturity, to the measure of all full stature of Christ. We must no longer be children tossed to and fro and blown about to every wind of doctrine by people's trickery, by their craftiness and deceitful scheming. But speaking the truth in love, we must grow up in every way into him who is the head, into Christ, from whom the whole body joined and knit together by every ligament with which it is equipped, as each part is working properly, promotes the body growth and building itself up in love.
Right. So I know you guys know about this. I know growing up in church, or you hear in some Israelite communities or circles about the five-fold ministry, right? He gave some as emissaries, apostles, prophets, some as evangelists, some as shepherds and teachers, right? But see, we got gifts. Everybody got a different gift, right? As life-giving nourishment for what? Building up the body of Yeshua, building up the body of Messiah, given to the body by its what? Head. We have these different gifts so we can serve one another as Adam, the male and female pair priests, right? And so we see again here there's a reiteration of being rooted in Christ, from whom our nutrients come from, our life-giving and sustaining source, right? Again, you got anything to say before we move on, BA?
Well, go ahead, sis. You all right. You good.
All right. Now we're gonna go to one of the famous passages. We're gonna go back and forth a little bit. We're gonna look at First Corinthians.
Uh-oh.
Ooh.
I know exactly where you're going.
I'm gonna be like Urkel. Did I say that? No.
Yeah, I know exactly where you're going. You're going to First Corinthians 11.
Did I say that?
Oh
Yes, I
no.
did.
Oh boy, here we go.
Right?
A whole bunch of doctrine come out of this. Boy. I've been hearing this for years.
Man, we gonna bring some things to light. We're gonna bring some things to light. Now, this is only for those who have ears to hear and who are
Yeah.
genuinely seeking, right? Who are objectively open to re-examining.
Like Christ said, we're not here for the wise and the prudent. Y'all
That's
know every
right.
Yeah, y'all know everything. So this is not for you. You know everything. You can't be taught when you know everything.
Mm,
These are people who want to humble themselves as little children, who want to grow, like we just last read, for those who are going to be edified and be lifted up in love, wanting to grow.
hmm Absolutely. Absolutely, BA. So, um, this letter of Corinthians, it falls into the category of what we talked about a couple of videos ago about the concord speech, where the orator or the speaker calls upon everyone in the city to live according to the characteristics of what they deem as a daily life. You know, their ethos. You know, it's the concord speech was one about telling people to respect the hierarchies and do things that went in harmony and were in accordance to what the Roman colonial community deemed as honorable, right? But Paul, when Paul is talking to the believers in Yahweh through Yeshua, who are the nations converting over into the ways, right? When he's talking to them, he is what? He's using subversive speech. And so instead of appealing for respect to hierarchies, he's telling them to be brothers, which is no rank in status. You have a closeness, right? Everybody's equal, right? You have equal purpose and common goal in mind when you come into the body of Yeshua Messiah. That's to bring honor and glory to the Most High Yahweh's name, to exhibit characteristics of the Spirit of Yahweh in earth, right? So I want to show this. Kenneth Bailey, we've been talking about before, shows an analysis, right, about a chiastic structure about what's going on. So this letter is not written in a linear fashion. You know, everything's pretty much, you know, a chiastic structure goes like that. And I'm going to show you this real quick here. So let me see if I can share my screen. Let me see if I can do it. Okay. All right. Let's cover this up for a minute. Let's make this a little bigger. That's good. Can you see that, BA?
Yep, I see him.
Okay, cool. If y'all can see that, that's good. Okay, so um, here in Corinthians, we got talking about what they say cross and Christian unity. I know, like, you know, I don't mind being called a Christian. I know sometimes this is a derogatory term for people, but pretty much Israelite believers of Yahweh who also believe in Yeshua. We'll say that, right? So in verses 1 to excuse me, in chapters 1 verses 1 to 7 and 24, right, there's something about the cross or the stake and the unity of the believers. Then there's something about theology of human sexuality, right, in chapter 7. Then in chapter 8 of Corinthians we see something about um talking about what's to be Christian and what's to be pagan, you know, things that are of the Most High Yahweh and things pagan that are in opposition, right? And then over here you have B matching with B up here. You have man and woman and order in worship, you know, talking about theology of human sexuality. Then A, resurrection. So we have something about the cross, and anytime we see something about the cross or the stake, what does that represent? When there's death, there's resurrection going to be talked about afterwards. So we see man and woman being talked about in the order of worship in chapters 11 for Corinthians, verses 2 all the way to chapter 14, verse 40. And then resurrection in chapter 15, verses 1 to 58. And then there's a personal note from Paul in chapter 16 of 1 Corinthians, verses 1 to 24. Right? So, let's see here. I want to bring, let's see. What Paul, let's see. Batteries is tripping. Let's see. Can you still hear me, BA?
Yep, you good.
Okay. So let's stop sharing for a hot second. Look at this one right here. A mouse is giving me a hard time. So, Kenneth Bailey, he also detects a pattern with each of the discourses of subversive speech that Paul is giving, right? So another chiastic structure of what's going on. There's a reference. I shared the wrong one again, huh? Okay, hold on. Let's see. No, that's not the one I want. Okay, hold on. See, my mouse get to tripping, and then I can't put up what I want to, right? There we go. Okay. All right, let's share the screen again. Can you still hear me, BA? Can y'all still hear me and see me? You good?
Yep, we still hear you and we can see you.
Okay, cool. All right. All right. Is this the same one, huh? Okay, nope. That's not the one I want to. That's not the one I want. Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness. Call this the Shanae moment, man. Like okay, that's the one I want. So another chiastic structure, right? There's a reference to tradition or creed, A, and then B, there's a problem stated negatively, and then C, the middle ground or the gist is what? There's a theology that solves the problem. And then B coincides with the problem stated negatively. Here is a return to the problem in a positive light. And then a personal appeal to do as Paul says, to imitate him, or some such exhortation. Right? So it's the fourth discourse that we're going to look at, running from 1 Corinthians chapter 11, of course, to from verses 2 from that chapter all the way to chapter 14, verse 40. And so the focal point is the passage at the center of the inversion, right? This. Let's see. Oh, okay. I know what I got to do. Okay. You know, this StreamYard that I'm using is still in beta mode for a lot of stuff that I got going on. It's still in beta mode for a lot of stuff here. So let's see. The answer, the focal point, the middle point, right, is what? Love. Love in chapter 13 of First Corinthians. I know you guys like, how do you see these chiastic or chiasmic structures in the text? I look at a lot of teachers a lot of times from like Hebrew roots, um, and Tony Robinson is a brother. I started listening to him about, I don't know, 4 or 5 years ago, and I started becoming familiar with these chiastic structures, these chiasmic structures, right? So here we see men and women talking about worshiping in chapter 11 verses 2 to 16, and then they're just talking about disorder in verses 17 to 34 of the same chapter. Then you have the rendering of spiritual gifts in First Corinthians 12, right? But the focal point is what? The problem solved here is what? Love. And so when you got love, you show everyone in chapter 14, First Corinthians, that they're spiritual gifts. Everyone comes together with their spiritual gifts to dismantle what? Disorder in the worship. To dismantle disorder in the worship, chapter 14. You see it says here, chapter 14, verses 26 to 33, and then talking about men and women in worship in chapter 14, verses 33 to 40. And I know a lot of times in verses 34 and 35, it says, you know, if woman is to be silent in the churches, and it says if she has anything to ask, she should ask her husband at home. I did a video on that because Paul was actually restating something from the oral law, or the Mishnah in the Talmud, where the traditions of men, some of the rabbinical Pharisees, they came up with this thing that said, woman, your voice is nakedness and lasciviousness, right? And then that's why in verse 36 of First Corinthians 14, you see Paul actually rebuking it, said, or did the word only come from you? Which meant, did the word only come from you males? Right? Because remember, during this time in Corinth, you had some people trying to creep in, which were who? The Judaizers, the Pharisaical type of sect, right? The Pharisees, a type of sect from the Pharisees coming in saying, hey, we're trying to push the oral laws onto the newcomers in the faith, right? Right. So now I'm gonna take my time with this video. It's gonna be a minute, right? But let me read a little bit from the scriptures, ISR, 1 Corinthians chapter 11. Gonna read verses 1 to 3. So become imitators of me as I also am of Messiah. And I praise you, brothers, gender inclusive, that you remember me in every way and keep the traditions as I delivered them to you. Because Paul is talking about the written Torah. Verse 3, and I wish you to know that the head of every man is the Messiah, and the head of woman is the man, and the head of Messiah is Elohim. I know people think there's a hierarchy here, but we're going to talk about this, right? So the Greek word for husband, wife, can also mean man and woman depending on context. So pretty much the scholars here in this text, 1 Corinthians 11 verses 1 to 3, man and woman is the intended usage of the word based on the following verses and based on the following historical research that I've done. When I did my 3-part series called Head and head covering. I got a lot of that information from here. And that's where I started to begin to learn about imperial cult. Right? This is after Paul left Corinth by Bruce Winter, looking at the influence of secular ethics and social change. Right? Let me put that down here. So, um, head here as a metaphor is in conjunction, right, with the image of a body. It just says it says that someone is the head of someone else, right? Now, a lot of people think this is about a chain of hierarchical command. The text actually shows it's not. If you look in verse 3, right, it says, the head of every man is Messiah. So you got Messiah being listed first. Then it says the head of woman is the man. Then you got the man listed second. And then you got the head of Messiah is Elohim. You have Elohim listed last. So if this was about a chain of command, then the syntax of the text would reflect it. The syntax of the text does not reflect a chain of hierarchical command. Right? So again, this is not about ruling over someone. This is about what? We're going to see if there's a possibility here if this is about head as the life-giving source or origin, right?
You know, for a long time I didn't see that until you brought it to my attention a few months ago. I have read over this plenty of times and never paid attention to that at all. And I think when you look at it from that perspective, then when you read the rest of this passage, it makes a lot more sense of what Paul is saying. It makes a lot more sense. And one thing I've noticed is that we tend to read the scriptures with somebody else's eyes. Because when you read it with somebody else's eyes, you're not going to see these type of things. That's what we always tell people. Make sure you read this stuff for yourself. Don't wait for someone else to set it up for you. Read it for yourself. And I'm done.
And take your time reading it.
Yeah, take your time. Yeah. You got your
Yeah,
whole life.
take your time, right? Slow things on down a little bit, you
Yeah,
know.
stop trying to promote different doctrines. That's what it's not about. It's about actually building a personal relationship here. This
Come
is
on.
not about, oh, I got the brand new doctrine. No, just read and study. The Most High will exalt you. Don't insult yourself. Let Him exalt you.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And so what we see here that I brought out in one of my videos here, and we're going to reiterate, is that the synopsis of head in First Corinthians chapter 11, verse 3 is pretty much source in origin for its meaning. Let's get into it. Right? Um Remember how we talked about in the beginning videos where we talked about patronage versus client? We talked about kinship and we talked about this thing of honor versus shame. This society, the Roman colonial lands that Paul went to, right? They're coming over into this newfound faith of believing in Yeshua as Messiah, right? So he's talking to them in a vernacular they would understand. So in this society, they were, brought up in a society where there was honor versus shame, right? Remember, in an honor or shame community or culture, whatever honor or shame you brought on yourself, You brought it on the whole family, clan, or tribe, pretty much. So if the one that gave origin was honored or shamed by your actions, then you're showing a solidarity, solidarity and unity with the whole group, right? So head here, source or origin, right? Now, I did this video. I'm not going to reiterate it a lot, but the head and head covering video, we showed that in imperial cult, Roman colonial lands, there were males, human males, such as Augustus Caesar, some of the family members raising themselves up to be gods. Caesar was called the son of God, right? And it would be imposed on the people to actually bring sacrifices to these human beings that deify themselves as gods, right? And so in this land, also in Corinth, it was a law of the land where a woman, right, um she had to actually cover her head literally to show that she was married. The women who walked around with their head uncovered, that was a law to show that they were the hetairai, or high class prostitutes. The men in Corinth, when they would cover their head literally with the toga, that signaled them as pagan priests to these human deified gods, and it signaled that they were offering or taking up sacrifices as priests to these pagan gods, so to speak, right? That's the backdrop. So
Eh,
head here, go ahead, BA.
just real quick, and these Roman landlords deifying themselves. The term is called apotheosis. That's the term. This is when these men, these human beings, these individuals made themselves gods. They call this apotheosis. Just wanted to stress that. Sis, we can't hear you.
I just remembered that, right? And I was like, it was red over here. That means mute. No. So head over here functions as source or origin, right? And we're going to see this in the chiastic structure here. And I'm going to have you continue to read, BA, but let me, while I have you read, I'm going to put this up for the people to see. If I can get my mouse to work right, it's probably, it's probably going out, but, all right. Let me share the screen, and I'm going to have you read verses 4 to 16 of 1 Corinthians 11 there.
First Corinthians chapter 11,
All right.
verse 4. Any man who prays or prophesies with something on his head disgraces his head. But any woman who prays,
Wait, wait,
excuse
wait,
me,
wait. Pause, pause, pause. Now,
yeah,
you
I
know,
know,
B8.
I
No,
know.
go ahead, read that
All right.
again.
Any man who prays or prophesies with something on his head disgraces his head. But any woman who prays or prophesies with her head unveiled disgraces her head. It is one and the same thing as having her head shaved. For if a woman will not veil herself, then she should cut it off her hair. But it is disgraceful for a woman to have her hair cut off or to be shaved. She should wear a veil. For a man ought not to have his head veiled, since he is the image and reflection of God. But woman is the reflection of man. Indeed, man was not made from woman, but woman from man. Neither was man created for the sake of woman, but woman for the sake of man. For this reason, a woman ought to have a symbol of authority on her head because of the angels. Nevertheless, in the Lord, woman is not independent of the man, or man independent of the woman. That's key right there. We skipped that one. For just as woman came from man, so man comes through woman. For all things come from God. Judge yourselves. Is it proper for a woman to pray to God with her head unveiled? He asking a question. Does not nature itself teach that if a man wears long hair, it is degrading to him? But if a woman has long hair, it is her glory, for her hair is given to her for a covering. But if anyone is disposed to be contentious, we have no such customs, nor do the church of God. Notice that part, we just skip over that last part.
All right. And I showed the chiastic structure here, but I have highlighted in green verse 9. We're going to look at verse 9 um, just a little bit more. So the interpretation in verse 9 is critical and key. It says, "For man was not created because of dia in the Greek woman, but Allah." The word Allah, al, means but in the Greek, right? Woman, because of dia, the man, right? All right. Now, before I go on, I do want to reiterate verse 14 here in 1 Corinthians 11. It says, "Does not nature itself teach you that if a man indeed has long hair, it is a disrespect to him?" Now, we know we have our brothers who do have long hair. We do have brothers with locks. Pretty much what Paul is saying to the people in Corinth. In Corinth, the men were actually, losing what's natural to them, and they were being homosexuals, and so they would grow their hair long to have these homosexual tendencies, right? But long hair grown now by our brothers, right, is they're not doing it to be homosexual. We have in Numbers chapter 6, the Most High saying, "Twist your hair and let it grow." You know what I mean? Let it grow long, especially if you're going to be a Nazarite, right? So this here, the verse 14, it's not saying that if a man or a male has long hair right now is disrespectful. No, it's the gist of what's going on in Corinth, why the males were growing their hair long. They were trying to present themselves as women or effeminate to attract other males for their homosexual tendencies, right? So I'm going to stop screen sharing. So now the early assembly, who we're talking about here, they did not see an issue here with a woman in disobedience. Like I was saying before, Corinth, they were a town that had a lot of licentiousness going on. It was loose, and there was a law of the land, um, Julian Claudian laws, Augustus Caesar laws that allowed married men to have legal adultery with these high class prostitutes or hetairai, right? And it was legal for them to do it. And when the women got married, they had to actually accept that their husbands could have adultery legally, right? There was also mother goddess worship, all of these what you call prestigious women oriented religious factions and spiritual factions, right? So
Yeah.
we have here again where you have an area that significantly looked at honor versus shame, right? Um, when you have shame, in this sense, you're bringing shame on your head, in both the sense of you're personally dishonoring yourself, and you're dishonoring the head, which is the husband, the head of the body, right? And so even some men, they of course were acting dishonorably in their appearance as well, and that's why I reiterated verse 14 of what it actually meant.
Exactly.
Right? I'm not getting this info from nowhere. You know what I'm saying? I'm getting this from all these sources: Roman wives, Roman widows. This talks about the new women and these high class prostitutes and all this stuff, right?
And one thing that we got to remember, the reason why the husbands had this type of this free range because of paterfamilias,
Because of what Rome said paterfamilias was. They said,
the head of household,
yeah, they
that
enforced.
status,
Yep.
that
And
social status gave
mm-hmm.
you all rights to legally do these things.
Mm-hmm. And how did and,
That's
and how did Rome define paterfamilias, BA? What
how I
was the
defined it.
definition of what was the definition of paterfamilias according to Rome?
Clarify one more time for me because I didn't
What
know.
was the definition of paterfamilias according to Rome?
According to Rome, I would say they were the head of household.
What does the head of household mean according to Rome?
Oh, to be in charge,
To have
ruler, to
lordship,
have
rulership,
rulership over
domination.
all,
Yep,
over women, children, and everything.
and
And
other males.
and it was a tradition that they trained their sons to be the next in line to also have rulership as well over everything, women and everything that came with it. You
Hmm.
know what I'm saying? So this is a tradition, you know what I'm saying, that comes from the Gentiles.
Well, it came from who? Augustus Caesar, Gaius Octavianus, right?
Exactly.
You remember? Okay. Yep. And so, First Corinthians 11, when we talked about the Greek word dia, it was translated as because or for in the passage, right? So using for or because suggests that the woman was created as this like second class citizen to suit the purposes of a man, right? But the real purpose, the genuine purpose, is to what? Look at the Genesis account and highlight Eve's completion of Adam as a corresponding match or a counterpart, right? Adam was incomplete and needed to have something that matched him, that,
Exactly.
that,
An
that
opposite that matched.
the opposite that matched the counterpart, right? And so because of Adam in his incompleteness, Dia, because of Adam in his incompleteness, Eve was created. Right now, women do have authority to what? Prophesy and participate in public worship. So a woman does show that she has authority when when she covers her head, bringing honor to herself and the community through her respectful and reverent behavior. Why? Why? Because she's discerning that she has morals and responsibilities, and she's accountable for that. Because why? She still lives in a land under Roman colonial rule. You do have to obey the laws of the land, and you don't want to bring this crazy eye upon this newfound community, because it'll be a smack in the face to the
Your
Roman
head of
rulers at the
household.
time. Nah,
Your
it's not
potter.
gonna be. It's not gonna be a smack in the. Well, who's it gonna be a smack in the face to? Ba.
Well, let's see. If the woman act, if according to the Roman rule, you know what I'm saying? If she, in other words, if she does anything out of pocket or out of order according to their rule, it brings back shame back to the household.
It brings back shame to which household?
The household code or the paterfamilias
Paterfamilias of who?
of Rome, the rulers of Rome.
The
You know what I'm saying?
rulers
Her
of
husband,
Rome.
rather.
There you go.
Exactly.
There you go.
The head of household.
Right.
So it's a reflection of her husband or the one who's over her or etc. or the rulers overall in general.
The rulers, Octavius Gaianus here. We just want to be
Exactly.
make sure we stay specific with people. So head here is in the sense of origin, right? Origin, or the source,
Mm-hmm.
right? In 1 Corinthians 11. So Paul has a challenge here, and this is what I was, when I'm asking BA questions, I'm bringing out some things. So when he's saying some things, I'm just making sure he like, okay, because be specific, because he helps me segue into what I'm saying, right? So Paul's challenge here is that uh you have a central focus of the fictive family, um and these newfound believers are coming into the body of Messiah. Now they're siblings. Now they have to show their loves as siblings and have and exhibit this close relationship. So the closest and the least status conscious of the relationships in the Greco-Roman world is siblings, right? And God is the paterfamilias. When you come into the newfound faith, God is the paterfamilias. God is the head of household, meaning God is the estate owner. And the estate owner that God acts as, or Yahweh acts as, is what? A loving, compassionate father, one who doesn't force you to do anything. But if you're going to have him as deity, as master, right? You do show you love him by following the instructions or teachings that he has placed to be in his house, right? And so when you have this newfound faith here, that Paul is coming into these lands who are under Roman colonial rule, right? You have this newfound faith. You got pretty much this Yeshua movement going on, right? And so what happens if you become flippant about these Roman customs here? You risk alienating and provoking the people you wish to reach. And if you keep on living as you did, well, you're negating the core message of the good news, right? So people with less status, they're likely to want to act on their newly elevated status in the Messiah, making the community suspect with those on the outside. But the people with the status, what happens? They're likely not to surrender their status because they don't want to give up their rank, and then they negate the good news, right? So um Paul's household code, it answered a question as what these newfound believers were going to do um to encourage the people to get past this dilemma, right? We're going to keep talking about the household code in Ephesians, right? I said we were going to go back and forth. You still there, BA? All right, he probably had to step away. So the
Yeah, I
motivation.
gotta step away real quick, just real quick.
Okay, no problem.
All
I'll
right.
say the motivation here for adhering to the social structure is faithfulness in the mission. The mission is what? Don't needlessly give offense to the surrounding culture as you practice your newfound faith, which is loving each other as siblings, right? And so, modern day Turkey is where Paul, Rome, these cities of Ephesus, Colossae, Galatia, um, Corinth, right? These are Asia Minor or Anatolia. So pretty much he's addressing a lot of these assemblies here. And Ephesians, this letter could have been written to a number of those assemblies in that region. And again, chapter 5, it's exhorting them. It's exhorting the newfound believers to put off their pagan ways of acting, behaving, and thinking. Right. So here we have a household code. Right. I know. Again, a lot of people go to Ephesians 5 and say, "Hey, you believers, you Israelites, now this is how you gotta behave. Men, you were supposed to do this, and women, you're supposed to do this." Right. We always go here, Ephesians 5. Right. And many people, what do you hear? You hear them interpretate these household codes as instructions to follow, um, using the old patriarchal standards of the Greco-Roman society. And what do I mean by patriarchal Greco-Roman society? The one of patriarchy that has infused in it lordship, rulership, domination, control, and status seeking. Now, other people see Ephesians 5 as a suggestion to teach husbands to lead their wives, but with a gentler patriarchy, something called servant leadership, right? But in contrast, Others, in contrast, what do they see? They see abolishing of patriarchy and hierarchy altogether. I'm part of the others, right? Part of the issue here is that many of us, when we come to read this passage, we're looking for an answer to a question that the author is not asking or addressing. So pretty much we have to listen to the author's intent on their own terms before we come to the passage asking questions, right? I don't know if he's back, but if he isn't, let's see. Ephesians 5. We're gonna go here. Y'all know where we're gonna go. All right.
I'm back.
You back? Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So I'm gonna have you read Ephesians 5. Verses 18 let's go to let's go to 18 to 22.
Ephesians 5, and we're going to pick it up at verse 18.
Mm-hmm.
Do not get drunk with wine, for that is debauchery, but fill with the Spirit, as you sing psalms and hymns and spiritual songs among yourselves. Sing and make melody to the Lord in your hearts, giving thanks to God the Father at all times, and for everything in the name of our Lord Jesus Christ. Be subject to one another out of reverence for Christ. Wives, be subject to your husbands as you are to the Lord. For the husband is the head of the
Hold,
wife.
hold it. That was verse 22, right?
Mhm.
Yeah, okay. You read verse 22, right?
I ain't get a chance to finish it.
Okay, my bad. My bad. Read that over again. Okay, my bad.
It's all good. 22. Wives, be subject to your husbands as you are to the Lord. For the husband is the head of the wife, just as Christ is the head of the church, the body, of which he is the Savior.
All right, so you reading from the Septuagint?
From the Greek and linear.
Greek interlinear. So verse 22 has included in it because the husband is the head of the wife.
Well, I read 22 and 23. That's my apologies.
Okay.
So
Now I want
22 be
I
yeah.
want you to stop at 22. Yeah.
All right,
My
okay.
bad. My bad. All right. So the scholars say uh, verses 18 of Ephesians 5 all the way to 22, they're saying it's one long complicated sentence. And so verse 18 says, and do not be drunk with wine in which is loose behavior, but be filled with the Spirit. And then they say that passage begins in verse 1 and 2. It says, become then imitators of Elohim as beloved children and walk in love, as Messiah also has loved us and gave himself for us a gift and an offering to Elohim for a sweet smelling fragrance. Right. And so let's see. I think I'm gonna have you keep reading, but let's pause for now. Let's pause for now. Um, the words to the importance of the words to the wives and the husbands are, yeah, they're to be understood dependent, totally dependent on their being filled with the ruach, the spirit, and the former, the worship, right? It took place primarily in the latter, which is the household. And so I'm gonna tell you in the Greek, in verse 21, um, in Ephesians chapter 5, well, actually, Ephesians chapter 5, verse 22, the words be subject to, hupotasso, they're not present in the Greek. But hupotasso, be subject to, it pretty much is a definition that has a choosing to place yourself under subjection and or status. It's a choice, right? So this household code is missional. You have to keep the mission in mind. Winning one another over in the behavior, right? So people can come to the covenant of Yahweh, right? So you exhibiting this type of behavior, you're choosing to do this. People see your behavior and then they want to come over to the Most High Yahweh, in which they will experience a newfound freedom that they didn't have in the social hierarchical system of the Roman colonial lands, right? Now, um, let's see. All right, so BA, start start at verse 22 of Ephesians 5 and read all the way down to verse 33.
All right. Wives, be subject to your husbands as you are to the Lord. For the husband is the head of the wife, just as Christ is the head of the church, the body of which he is the Savior. Just as the church is subject to Christ, so also wives ought to be in everything to their husbands. Husbands, love your wives, just as Christ loved the church and gave himself up for her, in order to make her holy by cleansing her with the washing of water by the word, so as to present the church to himself in splendor, without a spot or wrinkle or anything of the kind. Yes, so that she may be holy and without blemish. In the same way, husbands should love their wives as they do their own bodies. He who loves his wife loves himself. For no one ever hates his own body, but he nourishes and tenderly cares for it, just as Christ does for the church, because we are the members of his body. For his reason, a man, for this reason,
For
a man, sorry,
Go ahead. Go ahead.
yep. For this reason, a man will leave his father and mother and be joined to his wife, and the two will become one flesh. This is a great mystery, and I am applying it to church, to Christ and the church. Each of you, however, should love his wife as himself, and a wife should respect her husband.
Hey, read verse 33 over again.
Okay. Hold on. Each of you, however, should love his wife as himself, and a wife should respect her husband.
All right. So again, in verse 22 of Ephesians 5, the word be subject to is not there. I tell you where it is. It's in verse 21. It says, subjecting yourselves to each other in the fear of Elohim. You subject
Uh
yourself to one
oh.
another. You choose to serve one another.
Mm.
All of it. All right.
And
So,
through your conduct, it shows that you serve the Most High.
period. Right. So remember, the paterfamilias in the Greco-Roman household, like BA was saying, they ruled over the wife. They
Yep.
infused the patriarchy in what it meant to be the head. And the marriage arrangement was primarily a contract agreement to produce children that would advance the paterfamilias lineage. And so the woman, she saw her primary allegiance or value in giving birth um, for her husband, right? And so the Greek philosophers, again, Aristodemus from Aristotle, right, instructed husbands to rule over their wives for the sake of the social order. And so right here in Ephesians 5, it says in verse 21, be subject to one another out of reverence for Elohim, right? So what's Paul saying? This is an ethic. It's consistent with the fictive family for metaphor, fictive family metaphor, where we're siblings in the body. We're siblings of Messiah, and we're striving. Where if we're striving for Roman imperial status, well, that's gone. That's replaced with what? Having love for one another as siblings, showing that affection because we're equal now in status. because we have one common purpose and goal in mind, and that's to bring what? Honor and glory to the Most High Yahweh. And so Paul here uses what? Verse 23 says, because the husband is the head of the wife. That head metaphor, right? It's not saying to be the head. He's not giving an action. He's not giving a commandment here. This is not an activity that the husband does in relationship to the wife. Paul is pretty much reporting or describing a reality as it was in the Roman colonial land, not prescribing a role. It's not a prescription. So again, right? Let me reiterate: head in the Greek thought, the physical head here was what? About function, representation, and elevation. Function as the head as the origin or life-giving source. Representation, right? To distinguish, the head distinguishes pretty much who you are, right? It's how we identify because it's a representation of the whole body. In elevation, because what? The head is at the highest or top point in location, right? So that signifies what? Prominence and preeminence. So there's nowhere in the Greco-Roman literature that you got a person described as head of another individual as a body. But here we see something. Here in Ephesians 5, we're seeing something, right? And so this is not a head metaphor. It's not so much a head metaphor as it is a holistic organism for symbolizing unity, right? And so Ephesians 5, verse 31, it quotes Genesis 2 and 24, right? It says, for this reason or cause, a man shall leave his father and mother and be joined to his wife, and the two shall become one flesh. So this is physically talking about a body. Head is in the body, right? The two becoming one flesh. So there's a body and a head. They're one. I'm one. Look, I got a head and I got a body. One. You gonna say something, BA?
I was just gonna say how he stresses they become one flesh. We know that's in Genesis. But when we go to verse, what was that, 27, I believe, that you mentioned
Uh,
earlier?
I, just a minute ago, Genesis 2 and
When the word, no,
24.
when the word subjection, where's that at? In verse, hold on.
In the translations, it's in verse 22, but it actually only comes from verse 21 in the Greek.
Okay. It's 21, it says, be subject to one another, right? Out of reverence for Christ. Wives, be subject to your husbands as you are to the Lord. You know what I'm saying? But 21, it says to be subject to one another out of
Hmm.
reverence for Christ.
That's right.
So when you are one flesh, guess what you're doing? You're subject to each other.
Hmm.
You guys are serving one another. That's why, as you notice the language here, and it lines up. I mean, understand the connection Paul is making here. And then that's why Genesis chapter 2 and 24 is so relevant right here. You know what I'm saying? It stands out. You see, he who loves his wife loves himself. That's 28. Hold on, let me go back 28. In the same way, husbands should love their wives as they do their own bodies. He who loves his wife loves himself, for no one loves ever hates his own body, but he nourishes and tenderly cares for it, just as Christ doeth for the church. Right? I mean, right there. How you gonna show love for another person when we don't love yourself?
Hmm.
You have to love. You have to love to show and display the characteristic of love. You have to show it so others can see it. Not only do you treat yourself properly, you treat your wife or their significant other properly as well. That's how people see it from a distance. That's Torah right there. Just want to stress it.
Right.
That's why Genesis chapter 2 is so significant in 24. That right there is so significant. But go ahead.
Yeah. You see here we're talking about physical body, head, head and body are one. It's
Yeah,
one.
there is no rulership here.
Right.
This we're dealing with the head of household, doctrine. Where you see how it's getting cut and sliced. You see what Paul is doing here. Paul was a smart dude. He's speaking in terms that these people are familiar with. The household codes. See, just back then, the people were aware of the law, the civil laws of their land. They knew what they were. They knew what Paul was talking about. He wasn't talking to no dummies. He knew. They knew socially what he was talking about. See, we're the ones that have the problem. What we do is we want to read this and put our own spin on it. No. So, in other words, Paul is talking to these people in layman terms.
Mm-hmm.
But the reason why it seems different to us because we don't know what's going on socially or historically, what movements was going on in the land region where he taught. We don't know nothing about paterfamilias. We don't know nothing about that. We know nothing of it. We think it's a good thing. Not according to the ways of the Most High. It's that simple. So I always go back to this. Are we following the Most High or are we following Baal? Think about it.
Can you go to 1 Corinthians chapter 6 and read verses 12 to 20? BA, please.
You say 1 Corinthians?
Mm-hmm.
Chapter 6?
Yep.
Right.
Verses 12 to 20. We're going to reiterate some things about the two becoming one.
All right.
Head, body become one. We're going to talk about when this body becomes one, what you got to do with it, right? Go ahead.
Mm-hmm. There is no restriction in our affections, but only in yours. In return, I speak as to children. Open wide your hearts also. Do not be mismatched with unbelievers. For what partnership is there between righteousness and lawlessness? Or what fellowship is there between light and darkness? What agreement does Christ have with Belair?
Hold up. What you reading?
You say I'm in 2 Corinthians. Okay, I'm sorry.
Yeah. 1 Corinthians 6. My bad. 1 Corinthians 6.
That's my fault.
No problem. Okay. No problem.
12. 1 Corinthians 6 and pick up verse 12.
Mm-hmm.
All things are lawful for me, but not all things are beneficial. All things are lawful for me, but I will not be dominated by anything. Food is meant for the stomach and the stomach for food, and God will destroy both, one and the other. The body is meant not for fornication, but for the Lord, and the Lord for the body. And God raised the Lord, and will also raise us by his power. Do you not know that your bodies are members of Christ? Should I therefore take the members of Christ and make them members of a prostitute? Never. Do you know that whoever is united to a prostitute becomes one body with her? For it is said, the two shall be one flesh. But anyone united to the Lord becomes one spirit with him. Shun fornication. Every sin that a person commits is outside the body, but the fornicator sins against the body itself. Or do you know that your body is a temple of the Holy Spirit within you, which you have from God, and that you are not your own, for your own? For you were bought with a price there before glory. God in your body. Yeah,
Pause.
I'm sorry.
Read that again. Read verse 20 again.
Verse 420. For you were bought with a price, therefore glory God in your body.
And in your spirit, which are of Elohim, right?
Now, no, that's it in this translation right there. That was it.
No problem. So pretty much Paul has to reiterate that was a lot of sexual immorality going on. Pretty much joining with prostitutes, right? Right? In Corinth, what did I say could go on legally as a law of the land? It was said that the husbands could have their little, sexual fun with high class prostitutes called hetairai. And so a lot of the married women, when they saw this going on, sometimes they were like, okay, well, we're trying to, get a little something, something too. And so if you go back to 1 Corinthians 5, verse 1, it says it is commonly reported that there is whoring, prostitution among you, and such whoring as is not even named among the nations, so as one to have his father's wife. What were the wives doing? They were thinking, hey, we can just go off and have our little fun with our what? Stepsons.
See?
And I'm like, hey, Paul is saying you coming over into Yahweh's covenant fold through Yeshua, you got to put off these crazy sexual deviant acts. Got to stop doing it. You know why? Because now you're in the body of Messiah. If you're in the body of Messiah, you become one with Messiah. You show the fruits of the spirit of being in the body of the Messiah, right? You joining, and you're joining, doing these prostitution acts with these hetairai. You're joining yourself to them. You're becoming one with them. You can't serve two masters here, right? It unites when you're going off into the sexual deviant behavior, joining up with a prostitute. You're uniting, right? So I know in some ancient Israelite thought, a certain perspective says the physical union between um, a male and a female, like as complementary beings, is the manifestation of something mysterious. So Paul, he's what, making the combination of the head and the body parallel to the two becoming one. Two becoming one. Shanti got a head, Shanti got a body. One. They're attached. One. Right? Again, we don't see no lordship, rulership, domination. We don't see none of that there when you really break down this text. Right? So here we're making the case that the controlling metaphor for the husband and wife relationship in Ephesians, that household code, is a metaphor of head and body as um, identifiable parts visible to a unit that has become one, a unit, indivisible unit, right? Um, in Ephesians, what was this? Let me see. Do I want to go back? Uh, yep. So in Ephesians and Colossians earlier, we saw that the Messiah is higher in status to all else that exists. He was the beginning or origin at the beginning, right? And because of the qualities or the what should I say, the qualities or the accomplishments or achievements, what the task that he accomplished, because of that he outshines all of us in the sacrificial love he gave, right? um he did have the power, he had the supreme power, right? But he gave up or surrendered that power to the point of death, right? To do what was best for what? The body, the assembly. And so, as we can see here, the husband is not the wife's savior. Dang it, did I just say that? The husband is not the wife's savior. The husband is not the wife's God. If the husband thinks he's the God of the wife, then he's in a fallen state, as Genesis 3:16 would state. It says the woman's desire or turning would be to her husband, pretty much instead of the Most High Yahweh.
And just to add, that's idolatry when you push yourself up there as God over your wife.
Idolatry,
That's idolatry.
right? That's contrast to what? The Greco-Roman household. The Greco-Roman household, who had the power? The husband.
Yep.
And
And
so Paul,
paterfamilias, that's
right,
idolatry.
exactly.
Now you see why it's very important for Israel not to adopt these customs. It's very important. Mm.
Learn whose customs these belong to so that you won't be doing them, right?
Yeah.
In the Greco-Roman household, the husband is the one with the metaphor here. Excuse me, the metaphor here. Paul is saying, look, if you come into this newfound faith, husbands, surrender that power. You know why? Because in the kingdom of God, the one with the highest status goes to the one who what puts himself last. Remember in Mark 10 and Matthew 20, the Most High says to exalt yourself, you must what? Humble yourself,
It
right?
also lines up with Matthew chapter 11. I'm sorry, Matthew chapter 19. I believe when the the leaders, the Sadducees and the Pharisees were asking him, well, whose wife is this woman going to be in the resurrection?
What are you talking about? Matthew
And
22.
yeah, there you go.
Mm-hmm.
And the Messiah, the Master, he was saying how in the kingdom there ain't finna be no relations like that and
Right,
this and no that's not the kingdom.
right.
Yeah.
Shalom, Yeshua, Emmanuel said, I know this information is challenging because it goes against the traditional Christian church father paradigm we've been taught as to what Ephesians 5 and Colossians says, right?
Oh
Right.
boy.
So that's just, you got to go back to part one and look at some things.
It's a 7-part series, my brother. 7 part. It's the last one. 7-part series.
Yeah, it's the seventh and the final one. So, um, in the Roman colonial areas that Paul went to, of course, the authorities there, they're already suspect of what's going on with this newfound faith that people are adopting, right? This Yeshua movement, if you will. So, at that time in the Roman colonial lands, what you have, the husband was the ruler of the household, and he was the one that represented the household to the world, and um, the wives had a newfound freedom in this walk, and so um, you know the wife sometimes behaved. The wife, if she behaved in ways that were dishonorable to the husband, it would bring reproach not only to the wife but also to the husband and the entire household, right? Um, and it would fuel the suspicions of the outsiders and possibly hamper the witness of the assembly, the newfound assembly. So, a wife, if she's choosing to subject herself to her husband as authority, as Roman colonial law of the land would signify, then what she's doing um, was missional in that it rejected the status or it rejected the obsession with the status of the Romans and avoiding giving needless offense to the culture, right, to the community and what they deem honorable. So um, pretty much when she's choosing to subject herself to her husband, she's choosing to subject herself to herself. Why? Because she is a part of the body. She's attached. She's one, right? They're one. They're echad, right? They're fused. Fused together as one, echad. right? So if she's one, of course she wants um, the head of the body, the physical head of the body, to receive some honor because it's her head. It's hers, right? So in Ephesians 5:25 says, "Husbands, love your wives. Husbands, love your wives even to the point of death." Right? The husband who loves his wife as his own body, right? As his own body, what does he do? He nourishes it. He takes care of it. He cares for it.
Exactly. And
Why?
that's what we
Because
understand the
the head is
master to be separated.
the
He was set
life-giving
apart.
source.
He was
Life-giving
separated.
source.
He was set apart. You know what I'm saying?
Set
He
apart
kept
from
Torah from the world. He was
right.
set apart. You know what I'm saying? He was Torah. I mean, he kept Torah. He showed and established what Torah truly means. You know what I'm saying?
Who is he?
I'm talking about the master teacher known as Christ.
Oh, okay, okay. So my bad, my bad. So the pater familias, when you come over into the newfound faith of Yahweh through Yeshua, right? What do? You can choose to put yourself last or first.
Yep. But what did Christ do?
He put himself last to
Exactly.
elevate
The first
himself,
shall be
right?
last, and last shall be first.
First, right?
And he offered his life. He said, "No man take my life. I give my life."
hmm Give it
That's what a priest
a
does.
choice,
That's
right?
what
Because
that's what serving. That's serving.
that's serving, right?
Goes back to the garden. Abba Shema.
Abad and Shamar,
Exactly.
right? So the two, the male and female, have become one, and so
Exactly.
the man loves his wife as he loves himself because what? She is himself. The woman is what? The man outside of the man. And that's why we
Exactly.
reiterate again Genesis 2 in verse 24. For this
So
reason, a
man,
man
yep.
leaves his father and mother and be joined to his wife. The two become one flesh. So, Paul, what is he saying? He's applying the head and body metaphor to the husband and wife,
Exactly. They serve.
right? Also
And
applying
who?
what? He's applying the two become one as a metaphor for Christ and the assembly now, right?
Exactly.
All right.
Because Christ is the husband and the church is the wife.
Period.
And they become one body. This is the
Period.
language that Paul is using in these letters.
hmm
Look at the metaphor. Look at he's talking. He's actually speaking to these people and he's using common knowledge that they're very familiar with, and he's talking to them in layman terms. Because they are familiar with this language. Like I said, we're the ones that's not familiar with it. We're the ones that's behind. We're the ones that are lost and stuck and think that, oh, he's saying this, I'm the head. No, he's talking in parables. He's talking in metaphors. He's using analogies to explain this spirit, which we understand to be the Father, which is Yahweh. That's simple.
So when Paul says each of you should love his wife as he loves himself, right? A wife should respect their husband. There's mutual submission here. You each inform you each inform one another. Mutual submission here as this ehad organic unit that has come into play, right? So the husband, what does he do with his power? He chooses to subject himself to his wife and make sacrifice his mission, while the wife what? Who previously was without this status, now she has it. She places her status in service of the husband in the kingdom of God. So we see a mutuality here in submission. We see a mutuality here in serving one another, subjecting yourself to one another, choosing to serve one another. Why? To show the love for one another because you're exhibiting the love, the spirit, the characteristics of Yahweh the Father. If you submit and serve one another, you're showing yourself as siblings. You have that tight, intimate, close relationship. So this woman in this newfound faith through Yeshua, what? She got power now. She don't forcefully submit herself as an inferior. Forced to obey. She's not forced to obey. She has a choice now.
And she does it because she wants to.
The choice.
The choice. Just like Christ. He did it because he chose to do right. He
Right.
chose to do the Father's will. It is the Father's will for the husband and wife to serve one another. That is the will of the Father. And that, my brothers and sisters, is Torah.
Mutual submission, Torah. This is the full missional partner relationship of being in the kingdom of Yahweh, right? So guess what the man don't get to continue to do? If the man who comes out of the nations, comes out of the pagan ways, comes out of the obsession with status seeking social hierarchical structure of Rome, guess what? This man, when he comes over into the body of Messiah, when he comes over into the covenant fold of Yahweh through the body of Messiah, he no longer gets to play a status card and get his way. But guess what? When other men of the nations see you, new convert, in the ways that you're acting, right? When other men in the culture see that, what are they going to think when they observe? When you show a loving, respectful attitude to your wife out of sacrificial love towards her, and then other women in the nations, they see your newfound faith and your behavior that you're exhibiting, right? Other women see this, and what do they look at when they observe? They see this love and extended care you had toward your husband, and this is the mission. You win people over to the Most High Yahweh kingdom from your behavior. But here we don't have a command. We don't have a command for husband to be head, ruler, or authority over their wife. That's not here. We see something physical here, physical head and body of origin, source, not rulership, not authority. There's mutual submission here and a teaching on how that's supposed to look and be exhibited when you're living in the land, being a new convert over into the Most High Yahweh's kingdom, right? There's no old school patriarchy given here that Augustus Caesar came up with. That's not here. That's not here. Now I know, I know what did the paterfamilias do for Rome? The Roman paterfamilias, or the head of household, what they were to rule over the household for the sake of the social order, right? Let me read something here. Let's go back to Ephesians. Ephesians chapter 6, verse 1. Children, obey your parents in the master, for this is right. Honor or respect your father and mother, which is the first command with promise, in order that it might be well with you and you might live long on the earth. And you fathers, do not provoke your children, but bring them up in the instruction and admonition of the master. So verse 1, right? It says this is right. But verse 2 and 3, it says there's a promise linked to this. So the premise for like the children, just given blind submission, right, is subtly shifted away from accepting a domination, and it's toward an obedience as an act of servant, to the Most High Yahweh. right? Now, verse 4, it says, "And you, fathers, do not provoke your children, but bring them up in the instruction and admonition of the master." But this doesn't say bring up sons as good Roman citizens who'll carry out the family business and carry on the family name. And it doesn't say bring up daughters who will be Roman citizens worthy of marriages that create family to bring children into the world for the fathers. No, it's saying children are to be brought up in the discipline of the Most High Yahweh. Who's the paterfamilias? Yahweh is the paterfamilias, the father who is compassionate, loving, and nurturing. Right? The paterfamilias, Yahweh is the estate owner of the kingdom. So children are to be raised up and to take on not the Greco-Roman household roles, but they're supposed to take on the role as being children of the Most High Yahweh in His household, and they are not to be used as tools to develop the legacy of the Greco-Roman concept of paterfamilias. Right? BA, could you read verses 5 to 9 in Ephesians chapter 6?
Okay. Ephesians chapter 6,
Mm-hmm.
5 through 9. Be sure of this, that no fornicator or impure person or one who is greedy has any inheritance in the kingdom of Christ and of God. Let no one deceive you with empty words, for because of these things the wrath of God comes on those who are disobedient. Therefore, do not be associated with them, for once you were in darkness, but now.
Pause. Pause. You in Ephesians chapter 6?
Oh wow, chapter 5. I'm tripping. Okay.
That's strike number how many, BA? That's strike
All
number how
right.
many? No.
6,
Ephesians chapter 6, verses 5
verse
to
5.
9. Yep.
Slaves, obey your earthly masters with fear and trembling, in singleness of heart, as you obey Christ, not only while being watched in order to please them, but as slaves of Christ, doing the will of God from the heart. Render service with enthusiasm as to the Lord and not to men and women, knowing that whatever good we do, we will receive the same again from the Lord, whether we are slaves or free. And masters, do the same to them. Stop threatening them, for you know that both of you have the same master in heaven, and with him there is no partiality.
Tired, BA?
And I don't want to say that, but I'm just, you know what I'm saying?
So I got me one of these earlier. No, I'm playing. All right,
Yeah.
so here, unlike in Peter or Titus, we got instructions to obey, meaning to conform to authority, instead of um hupertasso, or choosing to subject yourself, right? But still, there's the act of obedience being transformed into an act of service to is being transformed from an act of service to the earthly head of household into an act of service for the Most High Yahweh as the paterfamilias, the household of Yahweh, right? So in verse 9, it says, masters, you do the same to them. So what is Paul doing? He's pretty much demoting the earthly paterfamilias um, to a slave or a servant, and says you're both servants or slaves in the household of God. That's true, right? So this instruction we must acknowledge it's a stark it's a stark forsaking of the Greco-Roman system or institution. And so here, guess what? There's no need to instruct wives, slaves, or children. So in the Greco-Roman Roman colonial land, right? They just obeyed, period, right? But here, Paul is saying, look, the structure of the household code of God. Um, it says that each member of the household has a mission, and you're missional partners. You contribute out of your own will to a bigger picture of what the Most High Yahweh as paterfamilias, estate owner, comforting, loving, nurturing father of the household of who? The household of Yahweh. So look here, this code that Paul is reiterating about the newfound faith of Yahweh through Yeshua, it's not based on a desire to protect this social order or gain or gain conformity to an ordained order of the world looked at through the Greco-Roman eyes. And nowhere here is a paterfamilias or head of household told to rule his household. But members of the household of the Most High Yahweh, like women, slaves, they're treated as what? People of their own will who have they're free moral agents. They have the ability to choose how they're going to act and behave within the house of the Most High Yahweh. All right. You got anything to say before I move on, BA? I know we taking our time in this, and I know this is quite extensive. However, I wanted to go out with go out with part 7, the final video, with a bang, right?
No, keep
So,
going.
all right. So we're going back to Colossians now. We read Colossians chapter 1 verses 15 to 20, right? And um, we read about in Colossians. In Colossae, there was a false teaching going on, pretty much Gnosticism, right? But now we're going to look at chapter 3, verses 1 all the way to chapter 4, verse 6. We're talking about a new instruction of living, a new household code when you come into the household of Yahweh through Yeshua, right? Let's see here. Okay. Um. Let's see. See 3 verses 1, 4 to 6. Yeah, let me just read that one. Okay. Um. BA, can you read Colossians chapter 3? Start from verse 1 and then read chapter 4 verse all the way up to chapter 4 verse 1.
All right. So if you have been raised with Christ, seeking the things that are above, where Christ is seated at the right hand of God, set your minds on things that are above, not on things that are on earth. For you have died, and your life is hidden with Christ in God. When Christ, who is your life, is revealed, then you also will be revealed with him in glory. To put death, therefore, whatever in you is earthly: fornication, impurity, passion, evil desire, greed, which is idolatry. On
Mm.
account of these, the wrath of God is coming on those who are disobedient. These are the ways you also once followed when you were living that life. But now you must get rid of all such things: anger, wrath, malice, slander, and abusive language from your mouth. Do not lie to one another, seeing that you have stripped off the old self with its practice, and have clothed yourself with the new self, which is being renewed in knowledge according to the image of its creator. In the renewal, there is no longer Greek and Jew, circumcised or in uncircumcised, barbarian, Scavian, slave and free, but Christ is all and in all.
Pause,
As God,
pause, pause. So Galatians 3 and 28, you remember it says there's no Jew or Greek. No slave or free. There is no male and female, right? But here in verse 11, the male and female component is gone, right?
Yep.
I just want to point that out. I'll get back to that in a second, but keep reading.
Verse 12. As God chooses one holy and beloved, clothe yourself with compassion, kindness, humility, meekness, and patience. Bear with one another, and if anyone has a complaint just against another, forgive each other, just as the Lord has forgiven you. So you also must forgive. Above all, clothe yourself with love, which binds everything together in perfect harmony, and let the peace of Christ rule in your heart. To dwell indeed, you were called in one body, and be thankful. Let the word of Christ dwell in you richly. Teach and admonish one another in all wisdom, and with gratitude in your hearts, singing psalms, hymns, and spiritual songs to God. And whatever you do, in word or deed, and do everything in the name of the Lord Jesus, giving thanks to God the Father through him. Wives, be subjected to your husbands, as it is fitting in the Lord. Husbands, love your wives and never treat them harshly. Children, obey your parents in everything, for this is your acceptable duty in the Lord. Fathers, do not provoke your children, or they may lose heart. Slaves, obey your earthly masters in everything, not only while being watched and in order to please them, but wholeheartedly fearing the Lord. Whatsoever your task, put yourselves into it as done for the Lord and not for your masters, since you know that from the Lord you will receive the inheritance as your reward. You serve the Lord Christ. For the wrongdoer will be paid back for whatever wrong has been done, and there is no partiality. Chapter
There's no
4.
there's no favoritism. Keep going.
Masters, treat your slaves justly and fairly, for you know that you also have a master in heaven.
Right. So in Galatians chapter 3 verse 28, when it says no Jew, no Greek, no slave, no free, no male, no female, pretty much it was addressing status within the community there, of course, right? In Colossians, um, it addresses unity. But there's no removal of the positions there in Galatians, right? There's no removal of the positions, but it does remove the status distinction, the caste system, by creating fictive sibling relationship, right? It's getting Galatians remove it does remove the caste system and saying there's inferiority, right? There's still positions, there's still fivefold ministry, right? You still have gifts to serve one another, right? You still have these positions, but these positions you hold doesn't mean you're better than the next or you're holier than the next, right? So the let's see, verse 12 to 15. Therefore, as chosen ones of Elohim, set apart and beloved, put on compassion, kindness, humbleness of mind, meekness, patience, bearing with one another, forgiving each other if anyone has a complaint against another. Indeed, as Messiah forgave you, should also do, right? But above all these, love. What's above all these? Love, which is a bond of the perfection. And let the peace, wellness, or wholeness of Elohim rule in your hearts, to which indeed you were called in one body, and be filled with thanks. Right. So that's the strongest encouragement there. You know, that's a strong encouragement there. This parallels Ephesians 5. Verses 18 to 20, right? What we read before. Do not be drunk with wine, in which is loose behavior, but be filled with the Spirit, speaking to each other in psalms and songs of praise and spiritual songs, singing and striking the strings in your heart to the Master, giving thanks always for all to Elohim the Father in the name of our Master Yeshua Messiah. Right? Be filled with the Spirit. Your worship, your everyday conduct, behavior, showing that you belong to the Most High Yahweh, right? And your thanksgiving, right? It sets the stage for the household code, right? The household code about wives and husbands, the household code about children and parents, the household code about slave and masters. So again, here, What is this about? The household codes of Yahweh. It gets rid of the desire to protect Roman hierarchical social order and gain for conformity to the world of the Romans, right? And again, we don't see no head of household or paterfamilias told to rule. We don't see that here. And like we have women and slaves, right? They're treated as what? The free moral agents that have the ability to choose how they're going to conduct and how they subject and serve one another within that household, right? So what? The submission of each, or the choosing to subject yourself, right, of each lower status member is what transformed from being an act of obedience, and it's transformed from being an act of obedience to the earthly paterfamilias of Rome to being a missional response to Yahweh as the head of household paterfamilias, a state owner of the newfound fictive family, right? Now, the man who had a concept of being the paterfamilias according to Rome, what he's told to do now here is what? He's told to act justly and righteously. There's a status reversal going on. And he's being likened to a what? A slave. He's being likened to a servant, right? So again, like we saw in Peter and Titus, what? The instruction here is linked to how the outsiders now are going to view us and see us in our newfound faith of how we're behaving and conducting ourselves because we're on a mission here, right? So household codes, they're status dismissing missional expressions in the Greco-Roman world. They leave the societal positions in place, but the allegiance, the loyalty right now, right, is moved to what? The act of the paterfamilias of Yahweh, of the household of the Most High, instead of who? The earthly paterfamilias in the Roman households. Anything you got to say, BA, before I move on? We almost done.
Oh, keep go ahead, sis. Keep doing your thing.
Y'all still there with me? Y'all still there with me, huh? Y'all just being attentive, right? Okay. All right. So, um, we're gonna look at a little bit of First Timothy, um, chapter 3. Let me see. Now I did some things on First Timothy chapter 3 and First Timothy chapter 2, right? But we gonna go there in a minute. We'll go there in a minute. Um, verse 14 and 15 here. Of First Timothy chapter 3. It says, "I am writing you this, expecting to come to you shortly. But if I delay, that you might know how you should behave in the house of Elohim, which is the assembly of the living Elohim, a support and foundation of the truth." Right? So here, the assembly is viewed as a fictive household. You got father, children are siblings, right? And the letter is presenting instructions on how to live, right? And so the the motivation for this letter, it doesn't appear or does not appear to present a household and how to operate a household, so to speak, right? So the two letters to Timothy at Ephesus, pretty much here, Timothy, right, at Ephesus, Titus, it suggests that the false teaching has become a problem where it's creating some sort of crisis, right? Um, like again, Gnosticism. This is a book. Let's see. I bought for like $5 from uh I'm forgetting the store, right? Half price books. It's called The Gnostics, the First Christian Heretics by Sean Martin. This book is really, really good. Gives you a gist of Gnosticism and the doctrine that it teaches. It pretty much is an upside down creation story, and we're going to get to that. And that explains a lot of what's going on in 1 Timothy chapter 2. We're going to get to verse 12 and 13 and stuff like that, right? So in Gnosticism, there's some crazy stories going on about genealogies, about which came first and which came next, right? That's Gnosticism in a nutshell, pretty much, right? A common element of Gnostic cults, it believed in a primal feminine source. You got something to say, BA? Oh, okay. So Gnosticism, it believed in a feminine as the primary source of which life came into being, right? In Ephesus, like I said, there was a lot of mother goddess worship. There was Artemis or Diana worship, um, and that was connected with the Isis worship going on as well. And that gives you a little backdrop of the understanding of Acts chapter 19, right? And so we learn from Second Timothy that the nature of the false teaching is related to Hymenaeus and Philetus' teaching about the resurrection. All right, I'm not going to read all of that. Um, there was a part where it talked about forbidding marriage, abstaining. That was something about expression of asceticism, Gnosticism, and it led to that belief in Gnosticism. It led to like some entanglement with the material world and childbirth, which the goddesses, uh, the Isis worship, the mother goddess worship, they frowned upon that. Those sects frowned upon what they frowned upon, something that would entangle them with the material world, and they thought childbirth prevented. They thought childbirth was how the material world got entangled with the spiritual world, right? Um, and so what was prevalent was if Gnosticism pretty much was prevalent for females to be dominating in, right? We see some of the false teaching going on in Timothy. First Timothy chapter 5 verses 13 to 15 says actually let me read from verse 11. It says, but refuse the younger widows, for when they become headstrong against the Messiah, they desire to marry, having guilt because they set aside their first belief. Verse 13, moreover, they learn to be idle, going about from house to house, and not only idle, but also gossips and busybodies. Busybodies, there could be workers of magic, speaking what is improper. So I resolve that the younger widows marry, they bear children, they rule the household or be masters of the household. What is that word? That word is I'll get it. Giving no occasion to the adversary for reviling. We looked at that word. Um, we looked at that word, and I think part three or no, part two. Part two. We looked at that word in part two. Let me see. Verse 14. Yeah, the word is oikadespotain. Oikadespotain. It means to be the master or head or rule the household, manage family affairs, right? So there's an instruction here for the young widows to do these things to counter Gnosticism. To counter Gnosticism, we see in 1 Timothy chapter 4, verse 3, where it says, for there's some forbidding to marry, to abstain from foods which Elohim created to be received with thanksgiving by those who believe and know the truth, right? Then 1 Timothy chapter 6. You want to read verse 20 and 21 for me, BA? 1 Timothy chapter 6, verses 20 and 21. I know I'm going fast on this part because I'm getting to some things here, and then we'll have some conclusions, and then we'll close out. And thank
All
y'all
right.
for continuing to listen. This is good. This is good.
1 Timothy 6:20 and 21.
Absolutely.
Okay. Timothy, guard what has been entrusted to you. Avoid the profane chatter and contradictions of what is falsely called knowledge. By professing it, some have missed the mark as regards the faith. Grace be with you.
Right. Oh, Timothy, watch over that which has been entrusted to you, turning aside from the profane and empty babblings and contradictions of the falsely called knowledge. Gnosis, Gnosticism. So the ones who were into this gnosis or knowledge were called Gnostics, because that's what the Greek word means, right? Which some have professed it, have missed. They've missed what was concerning the belief. The belief that what? That Yeshua is the most high Yahweh. I mean, excuse that Yeshua through the most high Yahweh, right? Came to bring salvation. Came to bring salvation, right? You don't get your salvation from status. You don't get your salvation from following the Greco-Roman household codes. All right. So I did a video on this. I did like I don't know how many videos I did on this, but it was from a book called I Suffer Not a Woman, by Richard and Catherine Kroger. And I looked at First Timothy chapter 2. I looked at First Timothy chapter 2, um, mainly verses 12 and 13, right? And we're going to do some talking about that right now. I'm going to have BA read First Timothy chapter 2, um, verses 9 to 14.
9 through 14.
Actually, uh, start from verse 8.
I desire then that in every place the men should pray, uplifting up holy hands without anger or argument. Also, that the women should dress themselves modestly and decently in suitable clothing, not with their hair braided or with gold pearls or expensive clothes, but with good works, as is proper for women who profess reverence for God. Let a woman learn in silence with full submission. I permit no woman to teach or to have authority over man. If she is to keep silent, for Adam was formed first, then Eve, and Adam was not deceived, but the woman was deceived and became a transgressor. Yet she will be saved through childbearing, provided they continue in faith and love and holiness with modesty.
Right. So pretty much, if you go back to chapter 1 of First Timothy, um, verse 3, as I appealed to you when I went into Macedonia. This is Paul, um, talking to Timothy, right? As I appealed to you when I went into Macedonia to remain in Ephesus in order to command some not to teach differently, nor to pay attention to fables and endless genealogies which cause disputes, rather than an administration of Elohim which is in belief. Now the goal of this command is to love is love from a clean heart, from a good conscience and a sincere belief, which some have missed. They turn aside to senseless talk, wishing to be teachers of Torah, written Torah, understanding neither what they say nor concerning what they strongly affirm. Right? False teaching, Gnosticism. You know why? There's a chapter here that talks about, let's see, Gnostic creation myths. You know what the Gnostics were teaching? Especially the women who were over in Gnosticism and the males, they were teaching that Eve was the creator and maker of all humankind.
Yep, they sure did. They were teaching that.
They were teaching that the serpent gave knowledge
Mm-hmm.
to Eve, then she
Mm-hmm.
can
Oh
give it
yeah,
to her husband, right?
exactly.
So this passage is about addressing false teaching here. 1 Timothy chapter 2, especially verse 12 and 13, are addressing Gnosticism, right? Now, if you're a surface level reader of the text, you think this is saying, hey, Shanti, you need to shut up somewhere, sit down, turn this freaking YouTube off, and go cover your head with a cloth,
And make
right?
sure your husband is present every time you speak.
Right?
You know
Right?
how these dudes are.
And some of the women, right? Now, when it says let a woman in verse 11 here in 1 Timothy chapter 2, verse 11, it says let a woman learn in silence. It says let a woman learn though, but the silence here is that of a student sitting down paying attention, because when you're learning something you need to be
Quiet.
silent so that you can hear and pay attention. That's what we see in Acts chapter 22 and 2. When Paul was trying to speak, the people were in silence. The same word here, esouchia. They were in silence so they can hear, pay attention to comprehend what he was saying. So it said, let a woman learn in what? Attentiveness.
Yeah.
So she can hear what's going on, so she can be properly taught. And then when she's properly taught, then she can what? Go out and teach. Watch this though. Right? Um the women here who were teaching this Gnosticism, this false doctrine here, they were what? They were being irreverent to what Paul was teaching. They were being disruptive to the foundation that Paul laid down from written Torah, and they were unwilling to be properly instructed. Now, we're going to talk about this word authentane, what's translated as usurp authority. Let me get to it. I'm going to read here the Greek from 1 Timothy chapter 2, verse 12 to 14. Gunaikide didaskin uk epitrepo ude authentane andras ala enai en ezuhia. Right? So it says Gunaiki D and women the dasking to teach uk not epitrepo I allow, right? Ude nor, and ude is one word. It's a conjunction that combines, right? So it's combining what? Not to teach or authentane. Authentane means not to teach that. Authentane means to seize something of force, such as claiming ownership, claiming authorship, or asserting yourself as the originator of man. You're not the author, originator, owner of man. You're not the creator of man, right? In Gnosticism, like I said, they were teaching that Eve created the man and every other human being, right? So in verse 12, the translation, the proper translation would be, I am not permitting a woman to teach, and in combination with this, to seize or take by force ownership, authorship, originating assertion, saying that she's the creator of man. Why? Because verse 13, because or Adam Gar for Adam, protos first, epilaste was shaped or molded, eta, then next Eve, right? Verse 14, Kai Adam uk, and Adam was not epatete, deceived or led into error, a day gune, but the wife apatetesa was led into order, it was led into error, right? Was led into error in parabase gegane, in transgression. So in parabase gegane, the wife, or excuse me, the woman here was deceived, and she has become what? Existing in transgression. So, and Adam was not led into error or deceived, but the woman was being led into error, and in transgression she has come into being, or in transgression has come to exist, so existing in transgression, because Gnosticism was teaching that Eve was not deceived. Gnosticism was teaching that Eve got some great insight and revelation, teaching from the serpent, right? Now, I contrasted silent with 1 Corinthians 14. I think it's either 33 or 34. It says, let your woman keep silent in the assembly. Well, that word silent over there in 1 Corinthians 14 is sagaio. It's not Hesuchia in here. So silent, sagaio, over in 1 Corinthians 14 meant to hush and shut up. Over here, Hesuchia, in 1 Timothy chapter 2, when it says learn in silence, that means it's saying learn so you can hear, be in quietness so you can hear and pay attention, and be instructed, right? So guess what this is about? 1 Timothy chapter 2, it's not about excluding women from teaching. It's saying she can't teach an upside down creation story. That's what it's saying. She cannot teach an upside down creation story. Because what happens? You're bringing shame on what's considered the newfound faith. You're bringing shame on the man from whom the woman comes out of. So you have to get properly instructed to teach, in order for you to go out and convey messages, the proper message of the good news, right? Anything you want to say before I move on further, BA? We're gonna wrap this thing on up.
No, go right ahead, sis. All good.
All right. I know we gotta get you. We gotta get you. We gotta get you rested. We gotta get my brother rested. Gotta get BA some rest
Yeah,
here.
yeah. So the job got me working. Just get ready to do these long shifts. So
Right.
yeah, it's crazy.
Right.
Yeah.
So here we show that the Greco-Roman teachers, they through the Greek philosophy, they instructed the paterfamilias of the Greco-Roman household to rule the household for the benefit of the community, what they thought was honorable. But we saw the biblical household codes, the household code of Yahweh in Paul's letters, is pretty much making a mockery of this kind of instruction, right? We looked at First Peter chapter 2 and 3. We looked at Titus chapter 2. We looked at Ephesians 5 and Colossians 3, right? And in Matthew, well, we looked at chapters 19 and 20. We looked at the household code in mind through the parables, right? They were a stark difference. The household codes of Yahweh are stark difference than the household code of the Greco-Roman, right? There's no paterfamilias told to rule. Women and slaves, they have the free choice of choosing to behave, right? And there's no desire to protect the social order or the hierarchy, to gain conformity to the nations in which they came out of, right? And so members of the household of Yahweh, they have a common mission, they have a common purpose, right? And that's to bring honor and glory to the Most High. And the mission, the goal of the mission, that pretty much drove their choices and decisions, right? So here we didn't necessarily see the New Testament or the Renewed Covenant household codes articulating and ordering of how family and household, you know, pretty much uh, should be. We're not seeing, a prescription to have that type of, household code now, right? But it was to show that the newfound faith, the new creation of the ethos. And remember what ethos was. Ethos was the characteristics of a community or city that's manifested through their beliefs and the way their city behaved, right? And so um the Pauline epistles and a lot of the parables that Yeshua rendered, they were talking about showing how this newfound creation, this new household of Yahweh, or the coming kingdom, um, we could show how it didn't create obstacles to hearing the good news, right? It gave instruction to people, um, about how to go about having the attitude to relate to one another in the household as siblings, as responding to serving one another in the household of the Most High Yahweh, right? So Paul and some of the authors of the Renewed Covenant, right? They entered these atmospheres of the society, and they observed from the surface the appearances of how the structures were set up, right? They redefine identity in terms um of that they were disconnected from those Roman social hierarchical structures, and they lived by what they valued as love for one another, concern for one another, serving the Most High Yahweh, serving one another, right? So we, as Israelites who believe in Yeshua, right, we're free from the world's status domination and obsession with it, because our new identity is in who? The Most High Yahweh. We are the royal priesthood, as sons and daughters, children of the Most High, right? So right, our actions demonstrate that our identity is not marked with status. It's not infused or entangled with trying to gain status of the world, right? Um, in the moving into the 4th century AD, there looks like what seems to be some evidence of the Roman Empire influencing the modern day church away from its identification with the Most High Yahweh and the coming kingdom, right? And so, uh, in conclusion, because I'm gonna wrap it up with what I just said about the modern day church or the modern day assembly getting away from its roots in the Most High Yahweh and what the principle of living was, right? So um, when the Most High Yahweh completed a creation, there's a perfect shalom, completeness or wholeness between the Most High Yahweh, humanity, and creation, and then humankind, Adam and Eve, what rebel, and that completeness, that wholeness is pretty much severed. We're separated from the Most High, and we're separated from each other. And so now we have a struggle with life and death. We're pretty much losing ourselves. We're like alienated from ourselves, right? So the beginning book, Genesis, it presents us with this picture of humanity where, power and domination have become the foundation, so to speak, through what? Man's religion, his customs, his vie for political power, right? And we start to form our own versions of what the present eternal thing is, right? And so um where what is what's supposed to be is is a shadow of light which has always been and will be, right? We've got this corruption and disorder thinking that's order. And so what do we have? Our rebellion leads to what? We have competing cultures, nationalities, right? And we're battling, right? um we're battling it out to make the 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 mindset of our brokenness eternal present. We're thinking that's prevailing, right? um we want to keep back the chaos. um we want to keep back the chaos and and what we deem as normal. We want to keep that from being destroyed. We want to keep that from being destroyed. We want what we've come up in our own mind is good and right in our own eyes. We want that not to be destroyed. But the Most High Yahweh, what does He want? He wants humanity, humankind, whom He has created, to come back to Him, to reunite in shalom, in completeness and wholeness again. And how do you have that strategy? Atonement. Through who? Abraham. When Abraham was obedient, then Isaac, who the promise came through, and then Jacob, whose name was changed to Israel, and then Israel chose, and then Israel was chosen to what? Be the beacon of light to bring humanity back, to redeem humanity, right? To redeem humanity back to the garden, back to this temple, back to the Sabbath, back to the promised land, right? So again, the five themes that we talked about: what? Identity, unity, the mission, inheritance, and affection, right? Uh, your identity. You find your identity now through Yeshua. You get your status from humbling yourself and being obedient to the Most High Yahweh, right? Unity. You're looked at as siblings, brothers and sisters, with Yeshua, and you gain this inheritance, right? You have that intimate, close relationship as brothers and sisters. You're on a mission, right? The mission is not vying for status and domination. The mission is to bring humanity back to the Most High Yahweh, to establish the Most High Yahweh's name, glorify, honor it, and have Him prevailing as King over heaven and earth, right? And if you're children of the Most High Yahweh, you're this royal priesthood. You have an inheritance. You have that inheritance. You have an investment in the benefits of being in the household. And then affection. Affection is you show love and compassion, grace, mercy, and patience to one another. They're not trying to force domination and lordship and power over one another, right? So there's some things that stand in our way, but we have to get out of our own way, right? We have to get out of our own way, and put off the old man, put off the Greco-Roman mindset of thinking, right? That you have to go to the Greco-Roman family business. Put that off, right? The paterfamilias in the Greco-Roman household where they were in charge and you had to just, be under their subjection by force, that's gone. Right? That's gone. Um the pastors in the congregations. I know there's a need to see Yahweh as the paterfamilias, the estate owner. The pastor or the shepherd of the congregation is not the paterfamilias. They're brothers and sisters in this thing like we are. Right? They're brothers and sisters like we are. They are supposed to help us understand the differences of the holy and the profane. However, I pray to the Most High Yahweh that some of the leaders, people who consider themselves leaders or shepherds, they understand this type of historical information that we brought out. I hope that they teach Paul from this perspective and not the church father doctrine perspective. Right? That's what I hope. Because why? The renewed covenant. Um, well, we've laid it out. It pretty much, if we want to live in the household of the Most High Yahweh, we gotta forsake and deconstruct the social hierarchical stuff where you got one person ruling, dominating, lording over, and doing it by force. Right? BA, you want to say anything? But before I continue and close this out.
Nah, sis, you go ahead and knock it out.
All right. We in the body of Messiah Yeshua, we have to be a witness to the kingdom, to the coming kingdom of the Most High Yahweh. Right? We're on a mission. The way we act and conduct and present ourselves to the people out here, it plays a viable part in helping to bring humankind back to the Most High Yahweh through His Son Yeshua. And we need to ask the Holy Spirit to give us proper knowledge, proper understanding, and the wisdom to know how and when to apply these principles, these matters. Right? That's what we need to do. Yahweh is the head of household, the paterfamilias, the estate owner. A loving, compassionate, nurturing father who allows us a choice to be obedient to him. Yahweh is the paterfamilias, is the estate owner that is legally responsible for the property, materials, and assets that the people in the household own. That's why he tasked his son Yeshua with paying the cost or paying the price. Right? Because we are the children in the house. We are the children, siblings in the household of Yahweh, brothers and sisters. Let us have that brother and sister relationship, that intimate, close bond where we love one another, tell each other our greatest secrets, forgive one another, right? We might fuss and fight and argue and bicker, but we come together because we understand our common purpose and goal to bring restoration for humanity, to bring restoration for humankind, to bring restoration in the body, in the temple, the Sabbath of the Most High Kingdom. The Sabbath, so the Most High can what? Rest. Rest. That means that the Most High can be king, reign and rule, take the throne. So when we show characteristics of our Father, we're bringing honor, glory to his name, to his reputation. And we have to be mindful and careful of the way we act, the way we talk, the way we move, the way we function. The nations can come because they are human beings. The nations can get into the kingdom of the Most High Yahweh. I hope Paul, when you go back and read and study and take this information to the Most High Yahweh, pray on it, meditate on it, and ask for the Holy Spirit to lead and guide you into a sound conclusion. I hope that for you, Paul's letters are not as hard or difficult to comprehend, understand, or grasp. Let's start to show some love. We don't need to try to control one another, lord over one another, dominate over one another. We don't need to do that. We're all going to have to answer to the Most High Yahweh. So with that being said, thank you, Brother BA, for coming on to this series. I love you. You know I'm with you. I'm here for you. I really love your input, your insight. I love your reading. I love what you contributed here, and I'm thankful. You know what I mean. You help jog my mind with ideas and concepts and other scriptures, texts, and verses to read that parallel with the points that we were bringing out. I really appreciate you. I know sometimes, like, hey, it's almost 11 o'clock. You supposed to be asleep. You supposed to be asleep about an hour ago. You know what I mean? According to your schedule. So I really appreciate you. I appreciate Sister Yahara, who's not here on the video. She's actually in the East Coast. Uh, so she's got a 3-hour difference. I experienced that a few weeks ago myself. It's very difficult transitioning from Pacific time to East Coast time in a matter of 4 or 5 hours. That plane ride too, that jet lag. Thank you to everyone who's tuned in to the video now. Thank you to everyone who tuned in from video number 1. I hope something was said again to edify, encourage, uplift, and build. I hope your personal relationship with the Most High Yahweh grows closer and stronger. I hope there's more understanding, more comprehension. I just hope and pray that you continue to stay in this walk, continue to stay motivated. Please don't let the behavior or misbehavior of some of these people out here who want to call themselves Israel discouraging you from calling yourself Israel. I hope that you don't see some of the misbehavior out here from some people, because don't let that discourage you. Let that be a motivation to, grow closer to the Most High Yahweh. Please don't let them discourage you from calling yourself what the Most High has called you. Honestly. Yisrael. Those who strive, wrestle, prevail, and rule with Elohim. I'm Yisrael because every day the Most High Yahweh allows me to wake up breathing. That's what I strive to be. That's what I strive to be. Don't let any of the crazy activity with some of the abuse and some of the mishandling of leadership discourage you. Stay encouraged. Stay in your word. Stay close to the Most High. Stay prayed up. Stay prayed up. I know what's going on. I see it. I got my ears to the internet, Hebrew, you know, social media streets. I know what's going on. But that was all the more reason why I was doing this series. BA, you want to say anything before I close out with the Aaronic blessing?
No, just would like to say, all praises to the Most High, and thank everybody for listening, whether you're live or we're looking at the recorded session. We appreciate you for coming out, and we got a whole lot more stuff coming right around the corner. We're gonna deal with some other information that most definitely is, will interest a lot of people. Most High willing, a lot of historical information, and we're gonna start dealing with the behavior and this. No, we're gonna. I shouldn't say that. Coming soon, we're gonna look at the social structure of the Israelite ancestors when they came out of Babylon or Mesopotamia, in the days of Ezra and Nehemiah. That's coming next. Be prepared. We got some dynamic fire information coming out, and I'm gonna leave it at that.
All praise to the Most High Yahweh. Sister Ashanti, my email is duckandodge1@gmail.com. That is DUCCNDODGE, the number 1 @gmail.com. And I am also going to put our references and research material in the description box. Right? Thank y'all for tuning in. Want to say Shabbat Shalom. Love y'all with the love of the Most High. The Aaronic priestly blessing. Yebarechacha Yahweh Weishmaraka. Ya'er Yahweh panav elecha vehuneka. Yisa Yahweh panav elecha vayasem laka shalom. May Yahweh bless you and keep you. May Yahweh make his face shine on you and show you favor. May Yahweh lift up his face towards you. That means accept you and give you shalom. Give you wholeness, completeness, and wellness. Love y'all with the love of the Most High. Y'all have a good and rest of your evening and a lovely rest of your Shabbat. Lila Tov.
Shalom.